Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to go ahead and call us to order at 9:01, and I'm wondering if Director Ross, can you take roll, please?
Sure. President Core,
Present.
Vice President Haley,
Here.
Here.
Member Katniss is not with us today. Member Clark, Dr. Clay, Dr. Clay, you're muted. I will come back to Dr. Clay. Dr. Hagerman,
Present.
Member Kravickas,
Here.
Member Meyerson, Dr. Cruz Rivera,
Here.
and Dr. Clay. We will reach back out for
Yeah,
Dr. Clay, but we do have a
Dr.
quorum.
Clay will.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Ross. Move us on to our business reports. Every December, the board appoints 3 members to a nominating committee. This committee will then prepare a slate of candidates to serve as the president and vice president of the board for the coming year, 2025. I want to express my appreciation for the board members agreeing to serve on this committee. That would be Jason Katniss, Dr. Jackie Clay, and myself. So with myself serving on that committee is indicative of the fact that I will be stepping down as president. It's been my tremendous honor. Today marks the end of my 8th year on the board, and I've been in leadership for 7.5 of those 8 years as either vice president or president, and it's been a tremendous honor. And always wanted to wield a gavel so I could bang it, and never really got that chance. But maybe whoever sits in this seat next. It's been quite stressful to try to lead a group of folks who are all very much smarter than myself. So I look forward to stepping aside, maybe moving down to either end, and we'll have some new leadership, which is never a bad thing. So again, nominating committee, member Katniss, member Clay, and myself, and we'll prepare a slate of candidates for consideration at the January 25 meeting. With that, I will move us on to the superintendent report. Superintendent Horn, your report, please.
Yes, my report today will be 3 items regarding the ESA. First of all, I've remarked at earlier meetings that we have, for 3 reasons which I described, all of which were beyond our control, we developed a terrible backload on reimbursements, which I consider to be unacceptable. We presented that to the task force that's working on the handbook, so it would be a group decision. It wouldn't be a unilateral decision. And the solution they've come up with, which we will implement, is that for all orders that are $2,000 or less, we'll simply go ahead and pay them and audit later. This will reduce the backlog from 89,000 orders to 85,000 orders. The 4,000 remaining backlog can be taken care of very quickly, and we'll be back on track for being within 30 days.
Please, no. You're not here to do anything at this point. It is the superintendent's report. Now I wish I did have a gavel. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave, please.
Accountability, that compassion.
Sir, you're out of order.
Please stop the corruption.
Look at these things. This is your bar that you've been passing out to people, give them $100,000. Because under our system, people from Colorado can do this, anyone can do this, and you have 43.
All right, you've had your 15 minutes of fame. Please step aside. Goodbye.
Please. Thank you.
You understand this? I'm just curious. I don't know what that is.
Well, I'm glad I'm going out with a bang as chair. So there we go. How about that? Superintendent Horn, please continue.
Yeah, so we will be able to go back to the 30-day period on reimbursements that we had last year. And then we had three very bad events that occurred last year, again, beyond our control, that caused us to get this kind of a backlog. But that's now history. And with this change, now the ones that are not checked, that are 2,000 or less, oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I don't understand the screen. Is the mic working? Huh?
It is.
It is working? Can we turn up the mic?
Good. I think we can hear you.
There's in the back, they're saying they can't.
Go ahead.
We have the mics as turned up as they can be in the room. So go ahead, Superintendent Horn.
Okay, I'll try talking. I'll try using my playground voice if I can. So we'll be back to the 30-day period of dealing with reimbursements the way we did last year, before we had three events beyond our control that created a lot of problems. For those whose applications are approved because they're 2,000 or less without checking, if the audit shows that they were improper, the money can be clawed back, and if it's fraudulent, there can be more severe consequences to that. But I think the good news is that we will be able to now process these within 30 days. So I know some people may be here to talk on that. I think that's already solved. Secondly, somebody went on social media to criticize us for turning down a $30,000 ham radio request. First of all, I want to say that most students get $7,000. Most special ed students get about $30,000 because in public school they would have all kinds of therapy, and the parents need to have the ability to give them the therapy that they would get in public school. So to spend $30,000 on one thing like that already is questionable. But in addition to that, he criticized us for not realizing that a ham radio can be educational. And the fact is that we had approved one in good faith for $10,631. It's when they came back asking for $30,000 that we did not approve it. This is used to monitor military communications. The FCC confirmed that an amateur license is needed to legally use this kind of radio. It's called a MARS, M-A-R-S radio. It's a modification that enables the operator to listen to military communications. That's what they were asking for when they asked for $30,000, to monitor military communications. The parents are attesting that their student, who's 19 years old, cannot pass general education standards. An amateur radio license includes a written and multiple choice examination. These parents also requested a portable solar AC and heating unit citing heat intolerance. The parents resubmitted doctor's notes saying that a solar AC was needed, being vague in its necessity for educational outcomes. The note was resubmitted a year after it was initially submitted for a separate order that was approved. Anyway, it was a misunderstanding that we don't recognize that a ham radio might be educational. It's a matter of needing to monitor the military and using your whole $30,000, which should be used for the needs of the special education child. And finally, a number of people criticize me from time to time because we have guardrails on this program requiring that expenditures be educationally sound and that they be reasonable cost. They say I should just grant whatever parents ask for and not pay attention to what it is that they do ask for. So I have a list of 33 things that that are applicable to this criticism. I'm only going to mention a few of them. If we granted whatever the parents asked for, we would have given them a $5,000 Rolex watch. If somebody can explain to me what the educational value of that is, I'd like to hear it. A $24,320 golf simulator. Believe it or not, a vasectomy testing kit. What does that have to do with education? So, and you know, Lincoln said, with public support, everything's possible. Without public support, nothing is possible. If we gave these things away with taxpayer funds, this program would not survive. It has to be educationally purposeful, as which was the purpose of the legislation, and it has to be reasonable in cost. If anybody wants the full list of 33, I'll give it to you, but I thought I'd give you a couple of examples. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'll move on to the Executive Director's report.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. As you know, every month we celebrate and honor two amazing students from across the state as part of our State Board Student of the Month. And we have not disappointed for December. We have two amazing kiddos here today. And we are super excited to have with us and their families as well. Up first, we have Hamsini Sankara, who is an 11th grade student at Basis Awatuki, was nominated by their teacher, Miss Genter, and is a dedicated student who supports community as part of the Student Government Association and formed a really fun club and inclusive group that they're going to talk about in just a moment. So Hamsini, take it away.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me an opportunity today to speak as a Student of the Month. My name is Hamsini Sankara, and I'm in 11th grade, currently attending Basis Awatuki. Today, I have with me my family and my amazing teacher who nominated me for this position, Ms. Genter. I've been attending Basis for 7 years, and only in high school did I realize my true potential. It was during 8th grade when I first met Ms. Genter, and during 9th and 10th grade when I had her as my AP and Honors English teacher. Ms. Genter was one of the teachers who always understood me in everything I faced. She believes in all of her students, as she supports us to try our best and improve from any mistake. I would never be here if it weren't for her. Throughout middle school and COVID, I was just a little girl with a big ambition. I was in love with dance. 9th grade was when I really got into it. You know, those daydreaming moments where you imagine yourself in a satisfying position? That was me. I've always had a dream of having my own dance class, where I teach multiple entertaining K-pop dances, soon to be performed at an event. And that's exactly what happened. Basis has an extraordinary opportunity where any student can create any club as long as they have a faculty or staff member to advise it. When I proposed my passion to Ms. Genter, she, also being a huge K-pop fan, agreed and urged me to start the club. The K-pop dance club was officially a big hit. Our school usually is split into 2 or 3 groups, depending on the grade levels that are permitted to join the club. So first we were debating whether to only allow a lower school or just the upper school. One of our other crazy plans was to alternate them each week. Yeah, no. We decided to bring our whole school together by being the only club in our school to include everyone, all of our grades, 4th through 12th. Our first year, 2023, was quite a struggle as we had 8 students from all of our grades. It was difficult for us to find a pace that benefited everyone. Eventually, we learned about the students and what's best for them to teach in a smooth and flowy manner. Soon, we held an incredibly well-received performance at International Night. With 14 students enrolled in the club this year, we anticipate another fantastic performance at International Night 2025. I love my club for everything it is, especially because of the emotions I get when 4th graders deliberately greet the high school students in the hallways. I know, crazy, right? My current vice president is a year below me, and our assistant choreographer is another year below us. So the club would have leadership even after I graduate next year. I'm really sad about that. I love my club. I still want to be a part of another club in college or even like out of college, anything like that, because this experience has taught me that any dream can be turned into a reality. Thank you for the recognition of my dream. I will strive to carry this with me forever.
Are you proud of your big sister? Are you proud of your sister? Yeah. All right.
That is a lot to ask a little brother to admit to on public record.
That was on the record
Yeah,
too.
I don't know if I could have done it. Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Catalina Martinez, who is a fourth grade student at Metcalf Elementary School in Greenlee County. Catalina was nominated by their principal, Chelsea Adams, and serves as student council president, serving and leading 650 students, and leads several clubs, including the Kindness Crew, the Cleanup Crew, the Character Strong Crew, and plays softball year round and is an avid reader. So, Catalina.
Good morning. My name is Catalina Martinez. I am a fourth grade student at Metcalf Elementary School in Morenci, Arizona. I love my school because it is a place that makes me feel happy. Every morning, I greet students coming in from their buses. I enjoy seeing these students every day. I love all of my teachers because they have taught me so many new things and make learning fun. The biggest accomplishment that I have achieved is when I was elected for student council president. I ran for president because I really care about my school and the students who go there. In order to achieve this goal, I had to write a speech and present it in front of second through fourth graders in student council and the teachers who are student council sponsors, explaining why I was a good choice for this role. I felt nervous to present my speech, but I remembered that I can do hard things and overcame my fear. I enjoy helping others and thrive in classrooms where I am able to lend a helping hand to students in need. This has allowed me to grow into a more confident and outgoing student. When I grow up, I would like to attend the University of Arizona and get a degree to become a pediatric occupational therapist. I am honored to receive this award. Thank you.
We should just all go home. There's
Yeah.
there's no
Always
topping,
tough to follow that.
no topping that. Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn. That concludes the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Sean. That'll move us on to item 2, which is called to the public. This is, of course, a time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. Because I believe we have a number of folks who would like to speak to us. I'm going to limit us to 2 minutes, each speaker to 2 minutes. Executive Director Ross, do you want to call our first speaker?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We have 2 folks here to speak in person. Up first is Stacy Brown, followed by Melissa Gardner.
Good morning. I'm Stacy Brown. I am one of the 10 Handbook Committee members. I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Handbook Committee. The Handbook Committee is an incredibly diverse group of individuals who are parents of students in various areas of the ESA program. We as a group have presented numerous concerns and solutions to the ESA staff. Executive Director John Word has taken every suggestion very seriously and has worked with Superintendent Horn to begin taking steps to implement these suggestions. I am beyond excited to see the announcements come forward as they become finalized for ESA parents. The ESA Handbook Committee was especially concerned about the transaction backlog. This was quickly brought up to John Word and staff members, and many solutions were proposed. The Handbook Committee settled on suggesting allowing purchases to go through and perform risk-based auditing on the back end. This would allow for ESA staff to go through accounts, but also to allow stakeholders to make the purchases necessary for their child's education without a financial burden. We want this program to be accessible to all children here in Arizona. Superintendent Horn, we greatly appreciate your collaboration with the Handbook Committee to implement our suggestions. Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Melissa Gardner in person, and then Superintendent Rusty Taylor virtually, and Brandy Blackford virtually.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Gardner, and I was here 2 months ago speaking to this board. And I expressed my frustration at the time with the long ESA reimbursement times. At the time, the average reimbursement time for a purchase was 10 weeks, but that was just the average. Many families, including myself, had been waiting up to longer than 12 weeks. ESA's response to unacceptably long reimbursement times is to have parents make purchases through the platform Class Wallet. I have followed this advice, and the issue that I'm finding is that it still takes 3 to 4 weeks to have that purchase reviewed by purchasers. And if on the platform you're going through a vendor like Amazon, if that price is changed at all, then yes, ESA approves the qualified purchase, and then Amazon will immediately cancel that order, which puts us right back to the beginning. So our options as parents are we resubmit that purchase again. And another option is to, yes, resubmit, and then to get on the phone and hope to be one of the 60 people on hold and see if we can get through on the ESA customer service line and have somebody now push that order through. That's the guidance that we are given as parents. We recently went through Black Friday deals and Cyber Monday deals. And because of what's happening with Amazon canceling these orders, I found myself spending an excessive amount of time looking for educational items that were not on sale. Anyone knows that when you're using your ESA funds, you want to stretch those funds as far as you can for your child to be able to get the most benefit for them. And I'm finding myself in a situation where I can't take advantage of those sale prices because of the way the system is. If ESA were a building, I'm here to tell you the building is on fire. Our funds, our kids, parents, we are trapped inside, and we are looking to you for guidance. Please help us.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have virtual speakers, Superintendent Rusty Taylor from NACO Elementary, Brandy Blackford, and then Simone Bell.
There we go. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Superintendent Horn, Executive Director, and the board members, thank you for having me today. I'm the superintendent from Naco Elementary School District. I started on July 1, 2023. We have just under 300 students. Our primary assessed value is just under $5 million, which makes us one of the poorest districts in Arizona. Our revenue control limit is just above $2 million, and a reduction, a 3% reduction to our general fund would be about $60,000. We've been on a cap since 2019. The reason for that is a previous business manager that was hired in 2019, actually 18, and then the previous superintendent was hired in 2019. They both resigned as of May 2023. I was hired, and I hired a new business manager, and we've been working through the cap, as I have listed to you guys in information for the FY22, because they did not complete it. Unfortunately, the FY23 finances had already been settled as of June 30th, 2023. So when our auditors came in, there was no change in regards to their policies and procedures and practices. We've been working hard, my new business manager and I, and my team, to correct the cap items. And we are pretty sure that we are going to have most, if not all, of those items addressed. I'm a former business manager, and I've worked in grants and general management for 15 years. So I have a pretty good feel of all this. And we've been working really closely with the Auditor General to help to correct these areas. I'm asking the board to please table this agenda item for now in regards to reduction to Naco Elementary. You can see that we don't have a robust amount of money, as I mentioned before. And it's also dealing with people that are no longer here at our school. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Just very quickly, just confirming Dr. Clay has joined the meeting, just for the record. Up next, we have Brandy Blackford, followed by Simone Bell, and then Emma Barlow.
Good morning, Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Here we are, 2 months after the last public school board meeting, and if possible, things with ESA appear to have gotten worse. The call center no longer takes calls on Saturdays, when most working parents have the time to sit on hold for hours waiting for someone to answer. We are still waiting on hold for hours when we call during the week, and most of the time are being told that there is nothing employees can do about the issues. It seems that the proposed 2024-2025 handbook is being used to train employees on things that are not in the adopted handbook, and tons of denials are happening based on non-existent and non-approved rules. New enrollees are being held to unwritten and unpublished rules that make things next to impossible to understand. There has been no newsletter in months and no emails that inform enrollees of any changes or of dates of processing. And while I agree with Superintendent Horn that items need to be reasonable and educational in basis, the definition of reasonable is different for everyone, as is what is reasonable versus long-lasting. And as for what is educational, while the 3 examples provided aren't inherently educational items, items are being denied that can be educational, and in most cases are educational and provided in the public school setting. Items required for chemistry and science that are denied because they also happen to be food items. Lumber needed for woodworking classes because it also happens to be able to be used as a building material. Reimbursements are now over 4 months behind, and while I appreciate what Superintendent Horn has said earlier, I will believe it when it happens. Families are having to choose to educate their children or pay their bills, and at this point, the bills must win. A couple of weeks ago, there was a mass cancellation of almost all pending Amazon orders with no warning. The emails that accompanied those cancellations stated orders that were placed to reorder those items would be reviewed in 7 days. There are still thousands of reorders that have not been reviewed at all. ESA is failing families at the fundamental level of being able to provide quality education for our children, where they are and how they need to learn. Please help us.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Simone Bell, followed by Emma Barlow, and then Steve Goodgame.
Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Honorable members of the Department of Education, First, I want to express our sincere gratitude for the swift approval of Q2 reimbursements. Your timely processing helped support our educational community efficiently. However, I must bring to your attention that Q1 reimbursements are still pending. This delay is really creating financial challenges for many of our families in this program. Additionally, we are experiencing significant issues with the marketplace orders. Currently, these orders are taking over 1 month to process, resulting in vendors canceling orders, and we start all over again. This disrupts the educational resources for families depending on it. To help elevate these administrative burdens, I like to propose a constructive solution. Many parents in our community are willing to volunteer and receive training to assist with ESA approval processes. This approach could provide extra support at no cost to the department, potentially streamlining approvals and reducing processing times. We appreciate your continued dedication to supporting students and families, and we look forward to working collaboratively to resolve these challenges. Thank you for your time and consideration. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next was Emma Barlow, but she has not yet joined us. So we have Steve Goodgame, followed by Sarah Peterson, and then Rachel Gelbach.
Hello, my name is Steve Goodgame. I'm the my amateur radio call sign is K5ATA, and I am the Education and Learning Manager for ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, what you affectionately know as ham radio. I'd like to speak today specifically regarding this case and the finding that amateur radio should not be eligible for purchase using ESA state funds, because it was 1, home audio equipment, or 2, industrial grade equipment. I'm not speaking to any particular need of the student in this case. The Federal Communications Commission rules Part 97 specifically state that an amateur station shall not broadcast or be used for broadcast. This definition is generally considered to be one-way communications intended for the general public. Amateur radio requires that all communications, with the exception of telemetry data, be two-way communications. Amateur radio equipment is by no means considered home audio equipment either, as home audio equipment is specifically designed for home entertainment and listening of produced media and broadcasts. On the issue of amateur radio equipment being industrial grade equipment, that too is factually incorrect. Industrial grade equipment is produced for the purpose of being used in an industrial setting, implying that it's used to create revenue. FCC rules Part 97 also specifically state that an amateur radio station is forbidden from utilizing amateur communications for the purposes of financial gain. Amateur radio serves as an ideal platform for STEM education, allowing students to learn electronics, physics, math, communication skills, and more. A full STEM curriculum is currently being developed. A full STEM curriculum is using amateur radio is currently being developed, and it's and will be available free of charge for use in all classrooms, homeschool organizations, and clubs across the country. This curriculum will be tied to national standards and correlated to state standards where applicable. The curriculum will consist of hands-on, video, and interactive lessons. Again, the finding that amateur radio equipment is industrial equipment or home audio equipment is factually incorrect according to FCC rules Part 97. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Sarah Peterson, followed by Rachel Gelbach, and then Harmony Lurley.
Sarah, you
Hello.
can start.
Can you hear me?
We can now. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, trying to get my camera to work. All
No
right.
worries.
Thank you. I would like to bring up a homeschooling truth that is personal to me. Homeschooling mothers often sacrifice the opportunity to have a career and double their family's income. Scarcity and frugality end up being a part of life for many of these families. It is unfortunate that there is no financial compensation for women who are making their children's growth and development their first priority. A simple calculation shows that in the 13 years I have kept my children out of public schools and taught them from home, I have saved the US government $600,000 while I have paid property taxes for others to have school funding for their children. My family recently joined the ESA program this fall, and I was in happy tears upon receiving my first approval email. I'm grateful for this new educational opportunity. However, ESA recipients are often seeing the words order rejected for items that serve an important purpose in the development and growth of children. As a homeschool parent, I care about meaningful experiences that help children become something greater. At times, ESA may be looking at submitted items with too critical an eye. Instead of rejecting items that appear to be non-educational, they should be asking if there's a purpose for these items that can be used for development and growth. In most cases, the answer is yes. Creative additions to homeschool study are very important for children to develop life experience in versatile ways. We need ESA to see the good and the purpose in items being submitted for approval. We submit a curriculum with each item to show how the items are being utilized for educating. Rejections to purchase requests inhibit the ability to accomplish desired educational goals. Homeschooling parents want freedom to educate in a variety of ways. We are deeply grateful for the opportunities provided. Thank you for your help and care for children, families, and education.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Rachel Gelbach and Tanya Rayner have not joined us. So up next is Harmony Lurley, followed by Misty Kelly, and then Ali Kalendra, excuse me.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Great. Esteemed members of the board, the ESA program has the potential to be a life-changing win for students in this state. Unfortunately, some of the ways it is currently being administered is harming our students' education. I am thankful to hear this morning that ESA is going to approve the huge backlog of reimbursements under $2,000, as many families cannot afford 3 to 4 month waits to get their money back for their children's educational materials. In light of Horn's other presentation regarding the 33 items that were deemed non-educational, I would like to point out that those are 33 items out of hundreds of thousands of items that are being approved and should be approved because they are educational. While it is important to show that the program has rigorous rules in what is allowed to be purchased, it is also equally important to recognize that the program overall, to the huge percentage, is being used in a responsible manner to educate Arizona's children. Another issue that I would like to bring up is the super secret price limits and item limits on various educational resources that are being put in place by ESA leadership without any official communication with parents. Parents find out about them only after spending more than the secret or unpublished limits when they're told they will not be reimbursed for items. How can an administration make up limits but tell no one so the parents do not know what the unwritten rules are? This is absolutely untenable. Families cannot trust a system like this and cannot use it best to educate their children. Please require ESA leadership to follow basic good business practices in communicating policies to their members. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Misty Kelly, Ali Kalandra, and Nayli Hernandez have not joined. So up next is Nina Conrad, followed by Mario Christner.
Good morning, board members. My name is Nina Conrad, and I'm a parent to a disabled ESA student. And today I want to address some of the critical challenges we're experiencing. Over the past quarter, we're facing unprecedented delays in 3 key areas: reimbursement processing, vendor pay, and marketplace order handling. Our reimbursement turnaround is currently 3 to 4 months for all students, but especially for those who are classified as disabled. This is extremely challenging. This puts the financial burden upon the families to wait and sometimes even have to forego both tutoring and or essential therapies that are crucial to helping students who are already struggling to meet important mile markers. The marketplace orders are being canceled after price changes because of prolonged processing, only to have to be resubmit orders and request them to be expedited, further delaying the system for other orders to be processed. Tutors and therapists who have gone through the process of becoming vendors are turning down vendor pay for reasons, again, of slow processing times, resulting in families, again, carrying the burden of choosing to provide funds themselves to get services until reimbursement comes, or simply having to forgo services altogether. The purpose of the ESA program is designed to provide educational options for families, particularly those with students who have special needs or unique educational circumstances. Delays in processing are at the core of accessibility to the current program. To address these critical processing delays, I recommend reinstating the previous digital processing system that was more efficient, increasing staffing to processing department to reduce the current backlog, and looking to implement processing expedition for those who have already gone through the process of becoming a vendor to the program. In closing, I want to thank the board for your continued support and commitment to our Arizona student success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Mario Christner.
Mario, you can go ahead and start your comment. We can see Mario is online and unmuted, but we are not hearing anything.
Oh. Can you say that again, Melissa?
Yeah, it looks like Mr. Christner is online and unmuted, but we're unable to hear him.
Okay.
In the meantime, I'm going to give the opportunity. It looks like we have someone in our attendee list signed in under their phone name, but not their actual name. So I'm going to give them the opportunity to state their name. So whoever's on here as Motorola G, you have the ability to unmute, and if you could state your name so we can know where you go in the request to speak.
Is someone registered under Motorola G looking to speak to us? If so, please identify yourself and begin.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we can keep working, and we have another call to the public coming up. And so if we're able to hear the folks, we can have them speak at that time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Executive Director Ross. With that, I'm going to move us on to the consent agenda. We have a number of items on the consent agenda 3A through 3O. At this point, I will ask if anyone would like to see any of those items removed, or if they would like to recuse themselves from any of those items.
So I need to recuse. I need to recuse from the move on one reading item. Is that item K? I'll make sure I'm doing the right letter. I don't have it in front of me.
It is item K.
All right.
Dr. Kaur, that's the same for me.
Anyone else?
Same for me.
Yes.
Same.
Same.
Dr. Kaur?
Yes. Dr. Clay, please. Dr. Clay, please go ahead.
Dr. Kaur, I would like to recuse myself from the vote from item O1, but I'd also like that item to be pulled for discussion. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Any items to be pulled other than Member Clark?
Yes, I'd like to pull item 3B, the ESA appeal case 0040.
Okay. Any other items to be pulled? Okay, let me see if I can keep this straight then. I will seek a motion to approve the consent agenda item 3A, 3C through 3J, 3L through N. Right? All right, there we go.
So moved. Nice job.
Thank you, Vice President Haley, and a second member Meyerson. Any conversation, discussion? With that, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, then we'll circle back. And Member Clark, you asked for 3B to be pulled. Please go ahead.
Yes, I asked for 3B to be pulled. Just to refresh everyone, this is the $4,000 musical instrument. I believe it was a cello. And I had a few questions, if I can, about the items, but am I allowed to?
We do have John Ward from the department here, if you would like to come up.
Is it John or would it be
Yeah.
Mrs. Sims or whatever you guys prefer?
John, if you don't mind.
Hi, Director Ward. I had a question about what category the musical instrument was in. I was assuming it was supplementary materials, but I wanted to confirm before I shared my concerns.
Right, that would be correct. It was a supplementary material.
Supplementary materials.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I asked for confirmation on that is because based on my viewing of the statute and the rule, supplementary materials does not have any type of cost containment in it. There's not even language under supplementary materials that says as approved by the department. In the statute under curriculum, it does say as approved by the department, but not supplementary materials. The legislature decided to pull supplementary materials out and make them a separate category, which we know because it's a heated discussion as it is. But because there is no dollar amount listed in statute or rule by the legislature, I do not believe that we as a board have the legal authority to cap the cost of any item inside of the supplementary materials category. I just don't believe we have that authority. And so if I'm missing anywhere in the statute or rule where there is cost containment for specific items, you could let me know, but I'm not aware.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, the statute gives the Department of Education the authority to oversee the ESA program. And so as part of our oversight of the program, we implement what we consider to be prudent and reasonable restrictions on certain items. And so in the case of this specific $16,000 cello, we thought that was excessive for what the item was, in light of the fact that good, high-quality cellos were also available at a far lower price.
Understood. Thank you, Director Ward.
Is that it? Okay. Then I will seek a motion to approve consent agenda item 3B as stated. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Clay, do I have a second? Member Meyerson. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign.
Nope.
Noted, Member Clark. I'll move us on to 3K, understanding we have two recusals that have been indicated. We still have quorum. We still haven't.
We do have quorum, Dr. Corr.
Okay, then well, I guess I will seek a motion to approve consent agenda item 3K as presented. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Haley, thank you. Any conversation or discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Recognizing the two recusals. So three, I guess I didn't break 301 and 2. I just removed 30. So, but I think, Dr. Clay, you want to speak directly to agenda item 301. So please go ahead.
Dr. Clore, members of the board, I would respectfully like to know the relationship between NACO and the Auditor General, and because I was told that there might have been some miscommunications between the two offices. So could somebody just clarify that for me?
Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Dr. Clay, members of the board. We do have Megan Eager with us today from the Auditor General's office, who is here to speak to item 301. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Hi there. Yes, my name is Megan Heeger. I am Director of the Accountability Services Division at the Auditor General's Office. My division oversees the issuance of the Uniform System of Financial Records for Arizona school districts, which is the baseline internal controls that districts must follow for safeguarding district monies and property. We also oversee the audit process of obtaining district audit reports and reviewing the deficiencies noted within those. So I heard Dr. Clay's question. Is there anything specific you wanted me to elaborate on?
Yes, ma'am. Was there communications between you and NACO? Because I was told that what was I told? I was told that by NACO that they were communicating with you, but then I was told otherwise, that no, it wasn't very clear communication. So there's just a clarification there. I'm kind of confused of what was going on. Well, was there communications?
Sure. If you don't mind, I can elaborate a little bit on our process too. I don't know if all of the members here today were here back in June of 2023. Myself and the current Auditor General came and did a presentation for the board to talk a little bit about what that process looks like, which is standard across all districts who we find in noncompliance. We first find a district in noncompliance based on their audit reports. We then compile and communicate the deficiencies identified within those reports to the district, and at the same time provide them with a corrective action plan template that the district must fill out to describe what they're doing to correct those deficiencies. That gives our office the opportunity to have some assurance that a district has put some corrective actions in place before my staff goes out to conduct a review and complete test work to ensure those corrective actions are completed. At any point in time during that process, we could receive a new year's audit report based on just timing that can occur. With NACO in particular, we first found them in noncompliance in December 2022. That year in particular was a little odd because the audit report deadline had been extended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So audit reports were not due until September, which we received theirs at that time, and then just put a little bit of delay on the whole process. So the district did complete a corrective action plan template. In the meantime, we did receive the district's next year's financial audit reports, which was fiscal year 22, which still indicated some deficiencies were in place. At that point in time, somewhat due to the timing with the audit reports, any district like NACO who was in that situation, we provided an updated list of deficiencies and gave them an additional 45 days to complete the new CAP template, since there were some new deficiencies noted. We did receive that from NACO in particular, and then conducted a status review in February of this year, 2024. After that point in time, we then received the district's next audit reports, which was fiscal year 23. And together, the results of our status review and that 2023 audit indicated the district was still in noncompliance. And so that was the reason for our communication onto the board. We had gone well past the 90 days at that point, but we have been in contact with the district. I believe my staff just had a meeting with them last week to talk through the most recent corrective action plan and talk through what the district is doing to correct some of those deficiencies.
Dr. Clay, any other questions?
So there was communications. It's just that they were not able to rectify
correct
deficiencies.
Correct. Yes, we have had communications, especially during this year. You know, we had our review in February. The district's audit reports for 2023 were late, so we didn't get those until July, which spread the time frame out a little bit more. But we have had conversations with the district, and I believe we do have some additional meetings set up to walk through those deficiency areas, which is a practice that we do with all non-compliance districts. Gives us the opportunity to give them some feedback on corrective actions that they're putting in place and understand a little bit more about what they're doing to correct those deficiencies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Corn. Thank you.
All right, fair enough. With that, then I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 3O, both 1 and 2. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further conversation or clarification? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That'll move us on to item 4. Once again, a call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. And again, given our agenda today, I will limit our speakers to 2 minutes. Executive Director Ross, do we have folks who want to chat with us?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Melissa, is Mario Christner still with us?
Yes, give me just 1 second so I can move him over as a panelist so he can speak.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Christner, you should have the ability to speak now. Just unmute and go ahead and give your comment.
Yeah, sorry, I was having problems with the computer, so I'm trying to do this with the phone. I also thought I was getting 3 minutes, and I am not a great reader, so forgive me if I take a little longer, but I prepared something to read, so I will not hopefully ramble.
That's fine. I will hold you pretty close to the 2 minutes. So you go ahead and do your best. Okay, get your main points in. Please go ahead.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Superintendent Horn and members of the board. My name is Mario Christner. I'm here today to address a pressing issue that affects many families utilizing the ESA program, specifically the recent denials of reimbursements for amateur ham radio curricula based on the classification of these materials as, quote, home theater and audio equipment. It's crucial to recognize that the educational value of ham radio extends far beyond the mere equipment. Engaging with ham radio provides students a unique opportunity to delve into various subjects, including grammar, English, science, social science, mathematics, and science. I just want to mention that the Arizona State University has a ham radio club. The Arizona Science Center features a ham radio station that educates the young visitors about radio communication and the applications in science technology. And in light of all these educational benefits, it's concerning that the classification of ham radio curricula as home theater and audio equipment undermines the legitimate educational value. Such a narrow interpretation not only limits resources available to students, but also disregards the comprehensive learning opportunities that ham radio provides. I also want to mention that going through the appeal process with the Office of Appeal hearings, no mention was made or decision made for costs, or as Superintendent Horn mentioned, the MARS part, which has nothing to do with monitoring military, but in use of catastrophes that the public uses their ham radio licenses to participate in catastrophes like hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff to help the general public. So it has nothing to do with monitoring military radio frequencies. I know my time's up. I had a lot more, but I appreciate your time.
I think you hit your main points. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We have learned that the caller who was identified by their phone is Nayeli Hernandez, and she's with us, with us virtually. So Nayeli.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
We can, Nayeli. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Nayeli Sid. My 8 and 10-year-old boys have been universal ESA recipients for almost 3 months. Being able to educate at home is something, I didn't know this, but it's something I always wanted to do, but I never got the guts to do it because we are a single income family. When I learned about ESA, it was a blessing. I immediately pulled it by the public school and began a school at home training. For that, I am so thankful to the state. However, I have been faced some challenges along my educational path, writing curriculums for very common school supplies, books, paper, puzzles, sciences. It's been very stressful and overwhelming. Our Amazon orders are taking so long. I'm afraid soon I'll be receiving an email saying our order has been canceled because of how long it took to get it through. I have been checking class wallet for the past 2.5 months, and my orders are still pending. Now my pending items, they're science, math, history books, and laptops. They're not Rolex watches or anything. And these are items that do not require curriculum, yet they are still taking too long to approve. I have submitted a few reimbursements, and although I'm still new to the program, I'm very concerned about the amount of special parents who mentioned the reimbursements taking nearly 10 weeks. I have been on the phone for hours, and when I'm next, it hangs up on me. And when I call back, my call can no longer go through because of the amount of calls. I understand that ESA representatives are understaffed, but they need better training. Some staff are rejecting orders that are in the parent handbook. Updating the parent handbook and being clear about any changes would be so helpful. Automated approvals for basic school supplies would also be so helpful. At the end of the day, we all want the best for our kids and their education. Please help us succeed as home educators, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, and just to clarify, staff's going to reach out to Nayeli. We had a little bit of trouble hearing her, so we're going to give her a chance to submit a written comment as well. So up next, Melissa, has Dr. Hargrove joined us? No, okay. So up next, we have Dr. John Croteau, the Superintendent of Dysart Unified School District.
Great.
Good morning, President Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address the critical role that essential standards should play in our state testing system. As a current superintendent of Dysart Unified School District, as a past principal and a past math educator, I see firsthand how essential standards serve as the backbone of effective teaching and impactful learning. Numerous school improvement initiatives revolve around essential standards. Professional learning communities, literature focuses on essential standards, and research on student achievement shows that implementing essential standards helps our learners that struggle most by promoting consistent instructional practices across classrooms and buildings. Essential standards are not just benchmarks, they are the foundation and focus of consistency in education. For students, these standards ensure that regardless of their zip code or background, they have access to a guaranteed and viable curriculum. When we clearly define what is essential, we eliminate ambiguity and ensure that all students master the most critical skills and concepts they need for success in the next grade level and beyond. This is not to say that all skills are not important, but these essential skills or these essential standards serve as building blocks to ensure that a firm foundation for students is set from year to year, regardless of where they intended the prior year. For teachers, essential standards are equally transformative. They provide clarity in a world where instructional time is finite and resources are often stretched. By narrowing the focus to what matters most, teachers can dive deeper into instruction, ensuring mastery rather than just mere exposure. Essential standards empower educators to collaborate more effectively, design targeted interventions, and innovate in ways that meet the diverse needs of our students. So in that, my time is up, and I thank you for your time and leadership in making this vision a reality. Have a great day.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Melissa, Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Okay, thank you. I will move us on then to the general session in item 5. This is for information only. This is presentation and discussion of updates on the progress and the development of the Arizona State Plan for Perkins 5, 24 to 27. So it's Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Course, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, just a table set quickly. As a reminder, the Department of Education develops the state plan for the Perkins 5 grant, which is the funding that oversees career and technical education. That grant came before the board last spring. The board had expressed a desire to see some changes in the plan. So the department submitted 2 required elements to the U.S. Department of Ed in order to secure funding for FY25, and is currently working on a revision of the plan, which is being led by Trevor Stokes, who has joined us today to provide an update.
Nice.
And
Please.
good morning, Dr. Core, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Always my pleasure to be with you. And I want to note, I always make an intentional effort to be here, well, at least an hour before I know I'm going to speak, because I enjoy seeing those Student of the Month presentations. And I'll tell you why. There is a theme that has run through at least 6 or 7 of these that I've watched, both virtually and in person. And that is that there is some sort of an emotional anchor beyond academics that creates that connection between a student and the educational experience, right? And we heard that today in extracurricular activities. Sometimes it is career aspirations or other things like that. But that concept of relevance is what drives my firm, Pathway to Careers, and it is what I think makes career and technical education so effective, and why we're looking at the best possible way to move forward with this plan. Director Ross, do I have a presentation on this?
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Core, members of the board. Yeah, Mr. Stokes, we do have your presentation. Melissa's queuing it up right now.
Okay, no problem. No problem. So you go ahead and advance a couple of slides, please. Past that one and one more. Yeah, and one more, please. There we go. All right, so we started off prior to this working on picking up a problematic process of developing the new Perkins plan for a 4-year period, and going back to reconsider both the content and the process behind this plan. So we established a number of guiding principles, which I've shared with you before, so I won't spend time on them, but I will note that I use this as the framework for all of our conversations, all of our documentation. Slide. Those 5 values were, general in nature, but it is within each of these 5 principles that we are doing this work. We said we would bring value to our students, and that would be far and away our number 1 priority. It would be the principle that guides everything that we do. We said we would also bring value to our employers. We would honor the vision of this board. We would honor the work that had been done to date, and we would document and communicate. Slide. So we identified, because of those 4 streams of work, in which we would focus on this revised version of the Perkins plan that we would propose to this body. Number 1 was board engagement, and I will spend a couple of minutes on that this morning. We did also hear from the members of this body that you wanted deeper engagement with industry on the ground in the areas that we operate as educational institutions. We wanted to pay attention to and consider the funding split between secondary and post-secondary institutions. And this body heard input from practitioners on the ground about the state-determined levels of performance and the formulas that are used to determine compliance with the state plan. So within these 4 streams of work, I'm going to give you separate updates. Slide. Within board engagement, I did a couple of things. Number 1, we went back and reviewed in detail the recordings and transcripts of the meetings in which the Perkins plan was originally presented to and considered by this body. Second, we scheduled individual conversations with a number of you board members. Those of you that we had not connected with, we would still love to do that if you would. but we have committed or have communicated directly with a number of you, and those conversations have been extremely rewarding. They've been very rich. One of the things that we ask that came out of my very first conversation with you, Dr. Kaur, I asked this question of you. You said this is the question you need to ask every member on the board. And my question was, what is your vision, your large picture vision for education in Arizona and for career and technical education in particular? And in these individual conversations, we have made a point of asking that question and of collecting the responses from the members of this body. Slide. So I summarized the inputs we collected in a couple of topics. Number one, we heard from you that you want the practitioners on the ground, the superintendents, the administrators, and in particular the educators, to be empowered to do what we want them to do, and that is to provide education to our students. So we heard from you that professional development, funding, curriculum, access to instructional materials, whatever it takes to make that instructor effective on the ground, this body wants that to be made available to those educators. So we have some detail in which we will go into that. Slide. Second, we heard you talk about our students. We heard some of you express concerns that we have regulation or expectations that actually serve nothing more than administration and does not redound to the educational benefit of our students. So we are looking at that as well. And we want to collect any further insights that you have because we are summarizing the vision of this body as both a standalone document and as the guiding principle for this revised Perkins state plan. Slide. You also told us to look at the communities. There are significant differences in the communities that we serve, both geological and socioeconomic. And there is a difference in what it takes to succeed as an educational institution in, for example, a very economically distressed rural community versus a very affluent urban one. We talked about special subgroups of students. Special populations and subgroups as defined by the ESSA were also brought up multiple times, right? That we want to make sure that what we are doing does not disregard the potential of all of our students, but leverages all of their special assets and special abilities to make them as successful as they can possibly be. Slides. So, yep, go on one more. Yeah, and one more. There you go. Yeah, we're already past that one, sorry. There we go. So, starting with the practitioners. So, you told us that this was a priority. We have engaged with practitioners on the ground in a number of ways. At the meetings of the state CTE directors, we have engaged twice in extended exercises to collect their perspectives on what we have been doing, what we proposed to do, and what we should now propose to do differently in order to make them more effective. Director Imes invited me to facilitate conversations at both of the most recent directors' meetings. These were long and very robust conversations. So it is the intent of this project team to hear what our practitioners on the ground have to say. And that was our initial effort at doing that. We also heard from the board about effective curriculum and learning assets, going back to the things that are required to make educators effective. Slide. And then lastly, we heard you say that we needed to talk to industry in the communities that we serve. If our graduates from career and technical education programs are supposed to be well positioned for access to quality careers, then we need to hear from our employers what it takes to access those quality careers. And we have made a direct effort at engaging industry via employer intermediaries and economic development organizations. Slide. We made an intentional, and another slide, sorry. We made a very intentional effort to outreach to organizations that covered the spectrum of the state. Slide, please. The organizations that we engaged ranged from the Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce in the north to the Yuma Private Industry Council in the south. We have engaged a number of these organizations because they interact regularly with a number of businesses. Not to trivialize it, but we're talking about a bang for our buck by being able to engage the voice or perspective of that many employers by connecting with one of these high value organizations. Slide. So in looking at the students and how we empower them to learn, slide, we heard a number of things. We heard that there has to be a priority on investing in our instructors, right? We heard a number of you talk about things that, obviously are not necessarily a part of Perkins funding, like student or teacher salaries, things like that. But we do understand that the vision of this board is that the educators we have on the ground across our state be the envy of the world, right? That is the aspiration we have around this idea of high quality instructors and instruction. Slide. We are also very, we heard you say, talk about career aware education. We want to make sure that we are not asking our students to learn just for the sake of academics, but rather we can show them that there is a reason behind what we are asking them to learn, and that those things are going to impact their lives after high school. Slide. And then we heard a couple of you really zero in on the question of special needs students, special education. We want to make sure there is a tricky conversation from a historical perspective around career and technical education, because we want to be sure that high quality CTE programs provide real opportunities for all of our students of all types across all our subgroups and special populations. But we also don't want to invoke the soft tyranny of low expectations either. So we don't want this to become, a catch-all that allows for, for simply avoiding high rigor academic pursuits because we assume that certain students cannot handle that. Right? Slide. And then lastly, we also heard a focus on students in our rural districts. A couple of you specifically brought this up, and we have made an effort to connect with superintendents in some of our more rural districts to help us understand the needs that are more particular to their challenges and to their aspirations in particular. Slide. So one of the other things, slide please. Yeah, and another. So the last one was communities that are empowered to thrive, especially in conversations with the post-secondary institutions across the state, including with AC4. We heard about the role of career and technical education programs at the post-secondary levels in our communities. It is because of the background that I have personally in straddling that line between economic development and education, it was not surprising to me to hear about the stories about how community colleges in some of our areas are essentially the talent pipeline for high priority industries and high priority business attraction efforts. And I can absolutely concur with those positions that were expressed during our conversations. I have watched that happen. I will not go into detail now in the interest of time, but I will tell you that there are high quality employers who are in our state now who brought brand new industries to our state who would not be here without the engagement of our community college system in the economic development and business attraction efforts. Slide. So slide, let's go through all of these, please, to in the interest of time, and one couple more. Thank you, Melissa. So one of the things that we did then was to break out two different efforts here. One in writing the Perkins plan so that we can comply with the requirements of that document, which is, which governs our distribution of a particular subset of CTE funding across the state. But we also heard from this body that there should be an aspirational strategic planning process that goes into the next 4 years of career and technical education in Arizona. Director Imes directed me to create a strategic planning process that would write a new CTE strategic plan for the state. There are things that can be included in that strategic plan that would not necessarily be included just in a plan for the distribution of Perkins funding. So 6 streams of work have already been identified, and the intention is to create work groups or committees around each of these in order to write a real aspirational strategic plan for coming years. Those 6 streams are particularly implementation of the board's vision. And what I hope to see by that is, a liaison between the department and this body as we go through this strategic planning process. Number 2, the same type of thing, intentional interaction with post-secondary partners to discuss the integration and collaboration within and around programs of study that would provide better benefit to all of our students. We also want a particular stream of work around low-performing institutions and districts. There were concerns about, how some of our districts would fare with the proposed levels of performance. So we want to be sure that professional development and other supports are available on those fronts. Number 5 was effective service to subgroups and special populations. And then lastly, a particular focus on community and industry engagement. Those are the 6 streams that we've identified for this strategic planning process. There actually was a strategic plan being developed not too long back, the process of which sort of got lost during a personnel transition near the top of the department. So we are re-engaging that process, starting it from scratch, and coming up with the kind of strategic plan that can reflect the aspirations of this body.
Mr. Stokes, let me stop you there and see if there are any questions from members of the board.
Certainly.
Any questions?
Dr. Kaur?
Dr. Clay, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One, you talked about the CT directors and having a meeting with them, and you talked about robust conversation. What was the common denominator in this robust conversation?
The second meeting in particular, we had a theme emerging about the need for collaboration and community of practice among the CTE directors. It was mentioned a lot more than I expected to hear, but we heard that the sharing of best practices, the sharing of strategies, in particular outside the classroom, how to interact with funding, how to interact with local leadership. A lot of those topics kept coming up and sort of provided a common thread through that conversation. In the first meeting, we were first introducing the concept of this Perkins Plan revision to a lot of those directors who hadn't been involved before. So that conversation was a bit more, I won't say scattered, but it was more wide-ranging, right, in that first conversation. So there have been direct interactions since then with a number of those directors. Many of them they want clarity on what's going to happen with their funding. They want clarity on what's going to happen with levels of performance. And that is
Uh-oh. I think we lost. Can you hear me?
I can't hear either.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I don't hear the committee.
Uh-oh.
Same here. I can hear you guys, but not the committee.
It looks like they went ahead and changed computers.
Put something in the chat, maybe.
Okay, let me go ahead and let them know right quick.
And did you have a second question, maybe?
Dr. Kaur, you guys froze. Everybody on this end was able to hear. We could hear each other, but
We never freeze. We were on spot, Dr. Clay. I
hey,
can tell
you
we
guys
did
froze.
not freeze.
You guys froze and we couldn't hear anything. I was getting ready to send a text. So, okay, I can go ahead and
Were you able to hear Mr. Stokes' response to your first question?
most of it. I would say maybe 80%, but I'll go back and look. I'll go back and look at it again. So
80% is a B, and I'll take that any day. So you go ahead with your second question.
okay, so let's go ahead and move on there. Okay, my concern with that answer with them saying that they weren't having that enough collaboration bothers me because I know there are 3 meetings in the year, major conferences that we have. So that one is going to be, I'm going to be asking some questions to some of the people out in the field about that. And the last question was your stakeholder visits. Where you talked to superintendents, and you talked to other people at businesses. Where were they at? Were you hitting the 4 corners of Arizona? I mean, could you tell me exactly where you were going when you were talking to these stakeholders, who they were?
absolutely, Dr. Clay. So I actually have a slide. I'm being told I need to move forward. I came with way too much stuff for you today. I'm very sorry. I tend to get a little long-winded. I do have a slide that shows geographically all the different organizations with which we interacted. We have in the north, we have the Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce, the Northeastern Arizona Local Workforce Development Board. Here in the Valley, we have GPEC. In the Southwest, we have the Yuma Private Industry Council and the Yuma Economic Development Organization. In the Southeast, we have interviewed the director of the White Mountain Economic Development Organization. So all told, these organizations together represent more than 25,000 employers. So, especially when you get GPEC and Flagstaff Chamber, you're looking at a large number of employers whose voices are being represented when we interview these directors. So, we made an intentional effort for geographical distribution across the state.
Okay,
that's the slide I was talking about.
There we go. Anything else, Dr. Clay?
Just a comment, Dr.
Please.
Kaur. Just a comment I would appreciate if you can get down a little bit southern and hit Cochise County, because it seems like that county is always, they're not included in things. So that's what I was listening for. So you didn't come down south enough. So if you can in the future, come down a little bit south, come down south a little bit more, so that you can listen to what's going on and the businesses and with the educators down there also, so you can get a full 360 of what's going on. Thank you.
Duly noted, Dr. Clay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, please, Vice President Haley.
Just a quick couple of questions. One, how are you engaging our community colleges, given our question about the funding breakdown formula? I think it was 12% for community colleges and 88% or 18% for community college and 82% for our K through 12 institutions. And I'm also curious to know how in your conversations are we thinking about dual enrollment and what we're doing at the state level, how that's comporting with the proposed Perkins 5 plan?
Great question. And thank you for that, Vice President Haley. A couple of different avenues. Number one, the AC4 has been fantastic in interfacing with us on this question. We've had 2 formal meetings with Mr. Borofsky, the director of the AC4. And Director Imes is organizing a formal meeting with community college representatives to go over all of these type of details, these strategic considerations that go along with considering a new paradigm for interacting between secondary and post-secondary CTE programming. So summarizing mainly through the AC4, we have also had a number of more informal conversations. I chair the Arizona CTE Quality Commission along with Colette Chapman. Mr. Borowski was there as well. We have a number of community college representatives on that body, and we have been updating that body on the progress of this project.
A couple other questions. You mentioned that there was an effort to do a new strategic plan. I find that really interesting. I know that they did one a number of years ago, which was, I think, largely informed the plan that was proposed earlier this year. One, what is the timeline? And two, will that timeline be part of the Perkins 5 plan that we see early next year?
So the previous attempt at a plan, the aborted attempt at the plan, was, as I understand it, and I wasn't directly involved, so forgive me if I'm not exact on this, but it was started in 2020, I believe, and then not completed. But again, I was not working with the department at that point, so I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. On the development of the new strategic plan, our idea is, to start it in parallel, but to do that type of strategic plan well, engaging all the different stakeholders that we laid out with all the different subgroups that will focus on those 6 streams of work at least, would take us beyond the February timeline at which we have to have this Perkins plan done.
Do you see that there will be parallels between what is proposed in the strategic plan and what the Perkins 5 proposal? Will there be parallels there, or do you think it will take it in a new direction? I would hate for us to apply for federal funding and then the state devise a strategic plan that is not aligned.
So I think that's a fantastic observation. And the answer is yes, the objectives of the strategic plan, we know where, what we are focusing on there. So we want to develop the Perkins plan with as much alignment to those objectives and aspirations, even if we have not yet had the stakeholder engagement and the efforts made to start developing the specific tactics and strategies, if that makes sense. That was a winding, long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
And then a few other questions is, as you've talked to business and industry, what steps are you all taking to ensure that the credentials individuals are earning are actually aligned to industry needs and demands, rather than those that are, they might have been great in 2016, but are still on the books?
Right. That is a particular passion of mine. My actual trade is I'm a labor market economist. And one of the things I often do is work with states to identify credentials of value that they can include in their CTE programs, right? So we are asking specific questions of these groups and these employers around the question of how do your employers validate the potential skills of an applicant, right? We want to know, are they looking for a high school diploma? Do they want to see that you were enrolled in a CTE program? Or do they want you to come to them carrying a Microsoft Office specialist certification, or a certified associate in project management, or an ASE automotive mechanic certification? Not just what are the skills you need, but how do you validate those skills in an applicant? Those are questions we are specifically asking here, because that one-on-one real-time conversation provides a particular perspective. There is another type of perspective that we also get from my work with empirical data, looking at job postings data to see specifically what credentials and qualifications are being written into job descriptions when employers are describing their opportunities in their own words.
That's great. I think that's it, at least for now.
Okay, thank you, Vice President Haley. Mr. Stokes, as you know, the previous Perkins plan attempts have been rejected twice by this board, and in large part because of the secondary, post-secondary funding split. The 18% reference earlier puts Arizona in the bottom 5 nationally. And although community colleges serve almost 50% of students, they do so with 18% of funding. Can you assure me there will be a different funding split in the final plan presented to this board?
I can assure you that we are trying to come up with both a definition of the split and a revision in strategic direction that would go along with that. Simply shifting the dollars from one to the other without changing the expectations and the responsibilities and the roles of the various participants would not necessarily be in the benefit of our students and our institutions. So we're trying to consider them in parallel, right? If we change the distribution of the dollars, how do we also change the way services are delivered?
And will you do both? Will there be a redistribution of the dollars?
I am not the one to make that final determination as to what goes into the plan, but
who is?
So I can't assure you of that.
Who is?
It would be the department.
Colette, you want to speak to that? I don't want to go a third round of rejection. So let's speak truth.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We have been looking critically at the funding split. Although I think the one thing that is getting lost is the reason our funding split is the way it is because we're only funding 10 community colleges. So you look at other states who are maybe getting a 50-50 split, they are funding way more colleges. So we look historically too at how much money community colleges have received, and they have received, in some cases, double within the last year. And I also have to look at the districts and how many that we actually add, because we're continually adding schools that are in that funding split. So their piece of the pie is getting smaller. Another thing we look at, as I believe I've said before, is community college funding streams. Okay, here's what the funding streams you have, and here's what the schools don't have. And so when we're looking at funding, I really have to look at the benefit of the students statewide. And I also think that funding needs to be more funding needs to be at the local level, because without us preparing students at the local level, the community colleges aren't going to be receiving those students.
Am I to understand you don't think community college are at the local level?
Oh, I'm sorry, at the school district level. I'm sorry, at the school district level. We are preparing students to be college or career ready. If we don't have the money to do that, then the colleges will not benefit either, because there's no pathway there. So, yeah.
Can I also
Sure.
try to clarify what I thought I heard your reasoning was? There are 10 community colleges, but more schools. So you're counting institutions, not students? Because community colleges serve an approximate equal number as K-12 with 18% of the funding.
Right, but that is.
You acknowledge that to be true, correct?
Well, if I remember correctly, Dr. Kaur, that we do, that the K through 12 do serve more than community colleges.
It's about 52-48,
Right.
correct?
Right. Okay. So.
With 18% of the
right.
funding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're supportive of that, or?
I'm supportive of the 1882 split for the reasons that I've stated. We have looked at other states. And Arizona's colleges are receiving more money actually than those who were funded, like, let's say 50-50. So we have looked, we have spoke with many people. The CTE administrators and districts are very concerned. And so it's tough. If we had a lot of money, yeah, but right now we're funding them lower every year because of the increase.
I just have
Because of the we add schools, so we're funding them at a lower level. Yeah.
Dr. Hagerman.
Oh, sorry. So my question is, in Arizona, it seems we often fund at the student level. And then when I hear this, it sounds like we're funding organizations. So the fact that there's less community colleges as opposed to the number of students, I'm just wondering. And also, I guess the two questions I have is, when we get whatever plan we get, I'd like to understand the formula. And I would suggest the more that it's at the student level, the better. The other
Okay.
thing I would like is a breakdown between CTEDs and K-12 LEAs, because there's sometimes you say K-12s, but then some of it's going to the CTEDs and something it was going to the LEAs. So, and I would just like to see kind of like what's our basis for the percentages, and the more that it could be at the student level than at the organizational level, the better.
We would be happy to do that. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up or no? Okay. Okay, he did. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? I thank you both.
Thank you.
Break. Yep. I whispered break, and it was enthusiastically responded to by my colleagues. So let's go ahead and let's take about a 15-minute break. We'll come back and plow through the rest of the agenda. Fantastic. Then I'm going to reconvene us and bring us back to the general session and item 5B. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the release of funds awarded to LEAs for the FY25 school safety grant. That should not be difficult to say. School safety grant. Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Core, Superintendent, members of the board. Actually, I'm sorry, before we jump to item 5B, Dr. Hargrove from Avondale is with us. She had requested to speak and call to the public and is speaking directly to item 5C. And so in speaking to some board members, we are going to let Dr. Hargrove speak. So
absolutely.
Dr.
Absolutely.
Hargrove.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President Core, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak around this agenda item next, not this next one, but the next after that. I want to share just a great appreciation that I have as superintendent to be able to be involved in multiple conversations with Superintendent Horn, members of his team, and definitely appreciate the intention behind talking about an adjustment to the assessment to allow for more usable data that is actionable by our educators, to be able to focus support and pacing for very specific essential standards, as well as not lengthening the exam. I do have some additional wonderments that remain. One of them would be, do we have ample time to be able to identify these essential standards and making sure that we have broad stakeholder participation in that process? Looking forward to having that happen. However, knowing that a compressed timeline could put us in a situation that we are not necessarily helping, but possibly could be hurting. So I'd love to be able to have consideration about lengthening that out, as well as we want to make sure we have opportunities to pilot. Anytime we have a new assessment, we want to make sure we have a complete understanding of what the expectations are. Finally, and probably what I would say are the most important piece for me and other members of our community is the complexity of the questions. And so when we think about how the questions were developed for AASA and that bank of questions that are going to be culled to be able to use on that exam as they have over the past several years, those questions are incredibly complex. They're at minimum, most at DOK 3 and DOK 4. And because of that, being able to drill down to exactly what's happening at a specific standard is incredibly difficult. And so I want to have a consideration of that to match what's happening in other states around the nation. Again, thank you so much for allowing me to have the opportunity to share, and I'm excited for next steps.
Thank you, Superintendent. Appreciate it.
So Dr. Core, item 5B refers to the approval of FY25 funds for the school safety grant. Just as a quick refresher for the board and those watching at home, the department oversees the school safety grant, which provides funding for schools to request a school resource officer, social worker, or school counselor. This is now the third iteration or third cycle of the grant, and is it required that the board approve the release of funds. So with us today is Mike Kurtenbach, Director of School Safety for the department.
Thank you, Director Ross. Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. As Director Ross said, my name is Mike Kurtenbach. I have the privilege of serving as the Director of School Safety in the Department of Education. Prior to assuming this role last year, I spent a little over 32 years with the Phoenix Police Department. As it relates to what I'm going to present on today, I spent time on the department as the commander and the assistant chief over our school resource officer program. Next slide. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the school safety program is governed by ARS 15154, which was established in 1994 and amended in 2019. When it was amended, it went from just being a program for school resource officers and juvenile probation officers to also include school counselors and school social workers. You can see the goal of the program is to promote, support, and enhance safe and effective learning environments for all students on school campuses in Arizona. Next slide. So as Director Ross was talking about, this is another round that we're bringing before you. The initial round that was approved by this board allowed us to grow from in FY19, There were 113 SROs in totality. It was a $12 million program. Now we're up to 835 awarded sites in 14 out of 15 counties. You can see the breakdown: 522 school counselors and social workers, 228 SROs, only 3 JPOs. Unfortunately, that program has really shrunk statewide. And there's 68 sites that use the school safety officer model through an outside vendor off-duty management. I'll get into a little more detail than that further in the presentation. Next slide. So this iteration of grants occurred because we recognized that there was significant carryover funds. In my position, I know it's Superintendent Horn's position, the money does no good sitting in an account. So we wanted to push the money out to our schools to provide them critical resources. So after receiving a waiver from ADOA, we opened up the grant cycle on October 21st, closed it on November 8th. Our proposed project start date is January 3rd, and depending on the direction from the board today, we hope to make notifications to those successfully applying tomorrow. Next slide. So provisions of the statute include that every applicant must provide a detailed description of their school safety needs. As it relates to the SRO and the JPO applications, those must include law-related education implementation plan. That's where we have officers in the classroom actually engaging with the students, teaching law-related education, and how they're going to use their trained SROs and JPOs. As it relates to the counselors and the social workers, they must describe the relationship between the position and the community resources and the plan for using that position effectively. Next slide. So this was the information that was provided at this mini grant. It seems to me kind of silly to call it a mini grant because of the amount. I call it a continuation grant. I struggle with my staff on this terminology, but we'll go with mini grant today. And we open it up to all LEAs statewide to apply. Next slide. So the process. So the way we prioritized funding was for high need LEAs applying for an SRO or SSO. And the way we defined high need LEA is for public or nonprofit LEAs with no school resource officers at one or more of their schools, with additional competitive preference being given to applications serving small rural LEAs. Dr. Clay knows I have been down to Cochise County, as I have throughout the state of Arizona, so I think she would appreciate this part of the application. Next slide. So this is where I mentioned I was going to get into what the SSO is. So the SRO traditionally is an assigned officer that is his or her primary job at one or more school campuses. What we recognized, certainly after 2020, when there was a vast shortage of police officers locally and nationally, was we had to get creative. There was much more need and ask for officers on campus than police chiefs and sheriffs had the ability to provide full-time SROs. So we created the School Safety Officer Program. So this is also a full authority peace officer, just as an SRO is, or a full authority reserve officer as certified by the Arizona Peace Officer and Standards Training Board. The difference is that if you think of it this way, that the SSO has a night job, probably, and their day job on their days off would be working in the schools. What we've always encouraged, and certainly in the job that I had before and the job that I have now, is to have the districts and the police departments or the sheriff's agencies work together to identify where there are opportunities to fill in a full-time role or where there's opportunities to fill in an off-time SSO capacity. Next slide. So funds that were not expended for schools applying for an SRO or SSO were used or will be used, pending approval, to fund school counselor or school social worker. You see the definition is very similar to the definition for SRO and SSO, just in this case, applying to counselors and social workers. Next slide. Definitions for counselors and social workers. A school counselor means a professional educator who holds a valid school counselor certificate issued by the Arizona Department of Education. School social worker is a professional educator who holds a valid school social work certificate issued by ADE. Next slide. So under this current grant cycle, the one that we're in right now, as it relates to SROs and JPOs, we had 310 positions approved. You see the breakdown: 307 SROs, 3 JPOs. There were 66 SRO applicants that could not be filled, so they have been filled by the SSO model statewide. And then we have what I'll refer to as a companion grant, a federal grant, the Stronger Connections Grant, where 18 SRO applicants are funded under that grant, separate and apart from the School Safety Program grant. Next slide. As it relates to school counselors and social workers, under the current cycle, 566 applications approved for funding. You can see 352 counselors, 175 social workers, and 39 either school counselors or school social workers, because those positions were interchangeable within the grant and they weren't able to be filled. Next slide. So this application was very successful. We didn't just put it out onto the street. Prior to issuing this application, we sent out a communication to all our district and site administrators, letting them know that this was coming, because the window was very short, for 3 weeks. As you can see, there were 127 LEAs or charters representing 333 schools that applied. Total dollar amount requested just under $56 million. And the breakdown, just under $40 million for SRO and JPO applications for 199 of those positions, and a little over $16 million for school counselor and school social worker. Next slide. So going back to the direction that the priority was to fill the SRO, SSO applications, all 199 are recommended for funding. With that, there were 134 school counselor and school social worker positions that were requested. Working with our CFO, we were able to identify funding that would allow for 64 of those positions to be awarded as well. Next slide. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the training that goes into this. And so in the slide, that, if you'll indulge me, we'll call that top line yellow, orange-ish. But this is broken down, it broke it down by positions. So all positions that are funded under the school safety program must attend Leadership 100. That's that foundational learning. So when it comes to the site, the district administrator, the site administrator, whether that be a principal, vice principal, dean, whatever the case may be, attends along with the agency supervisor. So think about a law enforcement, usually a police sergeant would attend. The SRO and the JPO attend Leadership 100 as well. That's the first day of their training. And then in addition to that, they have days 2, 3, and 4 that are about new officer training. And I'll provide a little bit more detail here in just a moment. I talked about the school safety officer program. What's very important to me is that if you go to a school and you see a uniformed officer or a sheriff's deputy, that you not be able to tell the difference between that's an SRO, that's an SSO. So we provide that foundational learning for our SSOs as well. All SSOs have been required to take 8 hours of asynchronous training that my training cadre has provided, with modules that they have to pass. That was for year 1, getting us up and running. And now in year 2, they have to attend, if they're local, in-person training. It's 4.5 hours long, which get a little bit more deeply into the role of an SRO or SSO. Again, don't want to differentiate between the two where at all possible, and really give them tools about how they can go into the classroom to provide law-related education. And the last part down there in red for the school counselor and school social worker, they go to Leadership 100 as well. And then they have a second day, which is new counselor or social worker training. And then that's for year 1. And then for year 2 and beyond, for all these returning positions, they have advanced courses that they're required to take that are commensurate with their position. Next slide. So the general training plan, as I said, there's an annual training requirement for all program funded positions. This isn't a one and done. You do that Leadership 100 in year 1, and then there's continuing training. And so the new participant training includes, as you see here, an overview of the program and required documentation. We must measure what we do. The roles and responsibilities of the partners, including law-related education, the school safety assessment and prevention team and their role in enhancing safety on our school campuses, Arizona revised statutes relevant to school safety and FERPA, and then child and adolescent development and mental health. And to provide context, my small but mighty training cadre will be providing training to about 2,500 participants in fiscal year 24. Going back to what Dr. Clay had mentioned before and others, and this is being mindful of how large our state is, when it comes to Maricopa County, that there's a requirement that training be in person, but we provide virtual options for the rest of the state. Plus, my training team has gone throughout the state to provide trainings as well, where there's a desire to have it in person. Next slide. The training plan specific to SROs and JPOs, as I mentioned, it's 4 days in person. Goes down to the 3 roles of a police officer, which is a law enforcement specialist, an educator, and a mentor or role model. I want the officers that are on the campus to develop relationships. The idea is that officer will work with a counselor, with a social worker, with the staff, In a perfect world, I want them to prevent a bad thing from happening before it ever happens. That's hard to measure, but I think we would all agree that's extremely important to do. They're taught child and adolescent development, understanding that a role they may have had previously is very different than working in a school environment, so we want to set them up for success. And then there's a section on students with disabilities, special ed, child and adolescent mental health, and trauma-informed practices. Next slide. The training plan specific to counselors and social workers, as I mentioned, this is a 2-day training. So the first step is understanding their role within the program, violence and substance abuse prevention strategies and other prevention strategies, and fostering a positive climate, building relationships with students in the school community, coordination with mental health service providers, and laws relative to parent confidentiality and parent rights. And then just as with the SROs and JPOs and the SSOs, there's electives in subsequent years. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Mike, and I appreciate you addressing Dr. Clay's question. Have you been to Cochise County before
Yes, sir.
she asked it?
I figured it was coming, so I thought I'd just go and address it.
Well played. Any questions from my colleagues?
I have a comment.
Oh, very good, Dr. Clay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mike, for everything that you do, even though you did take our star SRO from us.
I did,
That's
Dr.
why
Clay.
you were in Cochise County, because it took out people. But I do appreciate the partnership that we have and the collaboration and you being available anytime I call. So I just want to let everyone know, you're very supportive and I love the training. A shout out to, this is a good thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Clay.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Any questions or comments from my colleagues?
Yes, Dr. Kaur?
Oh, yeah. Please, Member Kravickas. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I really appreciate the really thorough briefing, and I appreciate the work that you helped all the legislators do in the last session when the bills were going through. I'm honestly going through emails because I got quite a lot of feedback from advocates regarding what kind of training for students with disabilities, trauma-informed practices, behavioral issues. So I'd love to follow up with you later just to address them because there are a lot. But I think probably the biggest theme, and you heard some of the testimony of parents in the legislative committees last week, and they're heartbreaking, is not just kind of what is a disability, but how to work with kids. And we all know that, especially post-COVID, we have a surge of behavioral issues in schools. So I'd love to talk to you privately and maybe get a meeting with some of the advocates to address the myriad of issues that they sent me over the weekend, if you wouldn't mind. But obviously this is a really big issue of concern for a lot of the parents and the families.
Dr. Kaur, Member Kravickas, I would welcome the opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Right. Member Meyerson?
I'm going to have to recuse myself from this vote as our school is one of the schools listed just as an FYI. But I also just wanted to name that, we've had a couple presentations where we've talked about school safety and just given the sort of influx of threats that schools had to receive or that schools received during the month of September specifically, but really over this last semester, it's clear that there is a need from schools given just the dramatic increase in applications. And so again, I just really appreciate your presentation and the thoroughness of the support provided to the officers to ensure that our schools continue to stay safe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, I have another question.
Yeah, please go ahead, Member Kravickas.
And for the lack of sounding, at the risk of sounding, I don't even know what the word is, can you tell me a little bit more about what is law-related education? What does that look like in the classroom?
Dr. Kaur, Member Kravickas. So what we're trying to do is really humanize and personalize the officers. And so we work with our partner, the Arizona Bar Foundation, in a program called Law for Kids to provide curricula that is age specific. So vaping is a big issue right now. There could be a module on vaping. There could be something else related to drugs, being a good citizen. It's all about, it isn't meant to be, and I heard the reference, Dr. Kaur, to the 80% being a B earlier. It isn't meant to be scored or graded, but it's meant to have the officers in the classroom with the teacher, engaging with the children. I think it's good for them, and it's also good for the students as well. So there's a whole library of curricula that the officers can use that's at their disposal. And the Bar Foundation actually provides staff to ensure that those officers are comfortable providing whatever individual curriculum they choose to provide.
Thank you. As a follow-up, Is there a curriculum that exists with significant modifications? I'm thinking about students with really more significant and severe disabilities that may be in self-contained classes that may not get access to LRE. But unfortunately, these are a lot of the kids who have negative interactions with police or SSO. So I'm wondering if that curriculum exists or if there's a way to make sure that we can develop that.
Dr. Core, Member Kravickas, I can't speak to that if it does, but if it doesn't exist, that's certainly something that we can partner to create.
Yeah, especially when we're thinking about kids who have severe behavioral issues, significant speech and language impairments, who can't convey or sensitivity issues. I think a specific modified curriculum would be great, and I'm sure we could find people in the field who know how to do that to partner with us.
I'm confident as well.
Thank you.
Superintendent Horn.
I just want to say Mike was modest to mention this, but he worked his way up the ranks of the police department to the point of assistant chief. And I think the Department of Education and families all over the state are lucky to have someone of his quality, making sure that we do everything we can to keep our kids safe.
Anyone else? Hearing none, do I have a motion that the State Board of Education approve the release of funds to awarded LEAs for the FY25 school safety grant? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark, do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Haley, any further discussion? Noting the recusal of Member Meyerson, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. All right, it's approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Core.
Going to move us on to 5C. This is the presentation and discussion of potential changes to the English language arts and mathematics standards and the AASA 3rd through 8th grade statewide assessments proposed by the ADE. This is for information only. Director Ross.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. With us first is Margaret Dugan from the department, and then presenting today will be Dr. Joseph Guzman and Linda Burrows.
Good afternoon, I think. No, still good morning.
It only seems like it.
Yeah. President Core, Superintendent Horn, and board members. Most of you, I think, have met me. Margaret Garcia Dugan. I'm deputy the second time around with Superintendent Horn. Love education, product of public education my whole life. I won't tell you how old I am, but it's been a long time. And today I'm here to present. I always feel that it's important when you're asking for change or modification, you give the why. And that's all I'm going to do today is to give why are we asking for the change for the 3 to 8 assessment, grades 3 through 8. I was very impressed with Dr. Hargrove and Dr. Croto. They have been on our committees and they are well versed, and they too have spent their lifetime in public education. I think most of you know our mission is to be a service agency committed to increasing academic achievement as well as empowering parents. We take that mission very seriously, especially the service and increasing academic achievement. And we have met with the superintendents. Superintendent Horn, we came into office January 23. He put together a superintendent's advisory. Right now we have close to 34 of the large districts, some other smaller districts that have joined Superintendent's Advisory Council. And we have very good discussions, and we focus everything on what can we do to help increase academic achievement in Arizona. So currently, as you've heard, the assessment, the AASA, grades 3 through 8, make it very difficult for our students for us to identify our students' strengths and weaknesses, primarily because of the way it was constructed. It was constructed in clusters versus individual standards. So it's very hard for our teachers, principals, and superintendents to have a lot of meaningful data come from clusters. So we are asking to look at creating essential standards from the standards we have, and also their sub-standards, we call them subcategories. These are necessary both in our language arts and mathematics. Without identifying these essential standards, teachers cannot target their instruction to what will be assessed at the end of the year. Principals find it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to figure out what areas their teachers need to work on to improve year after year in order to get better state assessment results. As most of you know, we have not moved the needle in 2-3 years. That's very disheartening to teachers as they work hard every day, principals who try to support their teachers. So we find this to be probably the most crucial decision that we make at the Arizona Department of Ed, is to help our teachers so they can improve instruction for their students. In a standards-based approach for teaching and learning, teachers teach what will be tested, and the test should align with what has been taught. For a lot of people, this is what we call mastery learning. We want the students to master those essential standards because they are prerequisite to further learning in their schooling. This is what we want, is mastery learning, not mystery learning. It's very disheartening to teach an essential standard that you're not going to assess, and vice versa. Why would we test something that has not been taught? If we told that to the regular public, they would think we were a little crazy that you're going to test something that has not been taught. So we want to align our standards to the assessment. Looking back at previous Arizona assessments, for example, the Ames, a standards-based assessment, teachers were able to identify the standards and the substandards for both English language and mathematics. By doing so, they were able to target their instruction, focus all of their activities to those essential standards. When I was a principal way back when, teachers and I looked forward to reviewing the test results together. We worked as teams, and that was something that we looked forward to every year. The teachers would sometimes try to beat me to their mailboxes so they could grab their assessment results and then quickly sit down with their counterparts in their grade levels or in their disciplines that they were teaching. We always felt that essentials standards helped us rise the tide that lifts all boats. I had English language learners, which most of you know is dear to my heart. Those students were also achieving at great rates, as well as our special ed students. The recipe for standards-based is very simple. It's a 3-part recipe. It's standards, assessment, and instruction. And of course, the hardest part is the instruction. And that's what teachers do each and every day, making sure that they align what they say, instructional materials, formative testing, the whole enchilada, to make sure their kids that they are teaching will be quite excelling in each of their courses. Teachers experience more efficacy, and more teacher teaming in our schools will result in schools which will help and support our teachers, especially those new to the profession. I had many teachers come to me during the Ames test and say it was so refreshing to have a defined curriculum with the standards that were aligned to the instruction. Students will be more motivated to learn, and teachers will realize that their effort and mastery of these standards will be rewarded with assessment results. The ADE is very committed to doing whatever we can to ensure students have high academic achievement in the years to come, and I know that you would agree with that as well. It's again disheartening to me when we are pegged as not doing well as Arizona students, and I think Betsy Hartgrove and I talked about this. Our kids are just as smart as any other student in any other state. So today, as I said, I'm just giving you the why from a practitioner for many years, and Linda and Joseph will talk about the what and the how as we approach this crucial decision. Thank you.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My name is Joseph Guzman, It's the first time I've appeared before you today over the last 2 years. So it's really our pleasure to share with the board the details of our efforts to focus the ASA exam and also provide greater feedback to teachers and school leaders. So we are the what and the how. So before I begin, I want to provide a little bit of background on what we've done. So the project was initiated based on expressed concerns from members of the superintendent's advisory panel group, and you heard them expressed very capably by Superintendent Crotow and Superintendent Hargrove. The adjustments being contemplated are simply by way of emphasis on certain standards based on teacher input. And we want to develop also more detailed feedback so that teachers will have better tools for responding to student needs and planning for the future. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we have met, the superintendent met on this topic with his advisory group on 2 occasions, and I also held 2 other meetings to discuss the details and parameters of the effort or the project. And lastly, most importantly, is that everything we're doing is within the confines or limits of the blueprint that was approved by this board for the ASA exams. So with that, let me hand it over to Deputy Assistant Superintendent.
Hello, President Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. My name is Linda Burrows. I'm the Deputy Associate Superintendent of Academic Standards, and I am here to update you on this project that my team was tasked with. So next slide, please. So we're going to go over the goals and objectives that were assigned to me, look at the timeline, next steps, and review some questions. Next slide, please. So the goal that Superintendent Horn wants is really to make sure that teachers are, students should be tested on what they are taught. And that's really the ultimate outcome of what we are looking at here. Next slide, please. We're looking at increasing academic achievement, as well as looking at making sure that those students are tested on what they are taught, and then seeing if there's any actionable data that we can provide to the field. Next slide, please. So really, we're looking at developing, or is there a potential to develop essential standards, looking at the AASA, and then looking at the reporting. So with regards to the standards, we're reviewing standards to see what should have a higher focus than maybe other standards on the AASA exam, knowing that all standards have to be taught on the exam. So what my team did was we have brought in stakeholders from all over the state and convened those groups over the past month. We are still in the process of it for the month of December to really develop what do those essential standards look like. Are there standards in 3rd grade that we can focus on more and give teachers more of a focus, with regards to keeping in mind that we are setting students up for success in 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. So not only do we look at the individual grade to see of those essential standards, but then are we ensuring that vertical articulation and progression of the standards through future grades? So if something, say, should be mastered in 6th grade, you're learning those fundamental skills in 5th, 4th, and 3rd grade down, and that we're including that as we're going through this. We plan to elicit feedback from the field in January of next year, as well as then reviewing that feedback, seeing are there items that are actionable. We'll bring those stakeholder groups back in to really look at that feedback and then communicate changes to the field for the 2025-2026 school year. Next slide, please. So then this is where my partners will look at the AASA. Once we've identified standards, are there reporting questions that we can provide actionable data to LEAs? Next slide, please. Or you can go through the next few. These are just the blueprints I included for your information that we want to make sure that we're staying within the current blueprints. And then the vendor for the AASA can provide increased reporting on some of those standards that can be reported on with reliability and validity. Next slide, please. And so these are our next steps, is really we're in that process of determining those essential standards, identifying changes to the assessment that do not impact the blueprint, gathering feedback from the field. We'll present those findings in springtime to the board. And then obviously creating resources, guidance, and training to the field so they're well prepared for next year. And with that, I conclude my presentation. I know it was quick, but I know we're a little behind schedule. So I'm open to answering any questions that the board may have.
Huge fan of snappy presentation.
There you
Well
go.
done. Huge
There we
fan.
go.
Any questions from my colleagues? Dr. Hagerman.
I'm a fan of snappy presentations too. So, I mean, I really appreciate the philosophy and where you guys are coming from. I have some logistical kinds of concerns or questions. Just the timeline seems pretty aggressive in comparison to what my experience from in the field. So, any sense of how you're going to try to like navigate that, try to like get it ready for next year, but kind of do the pieces? I don't see field testing of a new assessment. Are you thinking of just using questions you already have in the testing bank and that alleviates that? Or how do you navigate those kinds of things?
President Core, Superintendent Horn, Member Dr. Hagerman, that's a really good question. That would be one that would my colleague in assessments would be able to handle. I know standards and that's what I can say. So
on the standards process, we get to
with
this
the
point and
standards
then it
process,
becomes a testing
correct.
kind of
So the
consideration
testing
at that
and
point.
that would be a question for assessments, not for me. Yep.
Yeah, and I know some of it's theoretical at this point because you don't have what those essential standards and see how easy or how difficult it is to unwind it from the current questions.
Right. Dr. Core, Dr. Hagerman, my name is Bethany Spangemer. I'm the Deputy Associate Superintendent of Assessment, so I can answer some of those assessment questions for you. At this time, we were just looking at the standards themselves. The questions on AASA are aligned to our current standards. If we were to explore the possibility of changing any kind of item writing or item specifications for those items that are on the standard, that would be a different process, and we can walk through that at that time.
Okay, so you get to that point and then see what you have in front of you and kind of address it at that point.
Yes.
Let me just interject to be clear. When we began this effort, we did consult with our vendor Pearson, and we do have questions if we need them to exchange or insert. So I don't think we will have to develop new questions. And also, we don't see a need for pilot testing this, given that we're working within the blueprint.
Yeah. And so I do have a question about the blueprint. So is the approach to stay in blueprint to now come down to standards and have the standards equals a certain percentage of the clusters? And so you're still following the blueprint, but you've moved it down a level?
I'll let Linda expand on that, but the basic approach is to identify the most important standards that per the teacher stakeholder groups input, prioritize them, and see where they fall within the clusters of standards. And basically, the initial findings are that largely, the lion's share of the standards are considered essential. And working within the blueprint, we have the latitude to add one, at the most two more questions on those standards that are identified as essential, but we have to draw from standards that are identified as being maybe less essential. Some of those standards have very little room for change in the number of questions. So we'll see how it all plays out in the end, but it's not going to be drastic. It's a matter of emphasis and a little more clarity, and not a matter of just identifying some things that will be tested and other things that won't.
Sorry, and one last question.
Yeah, please.
And then the idea of having better standard level of reporting, I think, is a great idea. Has Pearson given you any kind of guidance given the questions, how what that could look like?
They certainly have. So they've offered different formats that they've used in other states and other formats that they haven't used yet. So what we intend to do is develop our own format with as much detail as possible without getting down to the point of providing detail on every last question, because then that wouldn't be statistically reliable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Would you like that?
Any other questions? Yeah,
I
Superintendent
was
Horn,
just going to
please.
say that we're doing our best to do a proper job without changing the blueprint. If we conclude that we're falling short and we need a change in the blueprint, then we would come back to the board and ask the board to consider any necessary changes to the blueprint.
Yeah, Member Meyerson, please.
Thanks so much for the presentation. It's my understanding that I think the board will actually, and you all will review there's sort of a window that will arise in the next 2 years to actually review holistically the assessment. And I agree with similarly sort of the philosophical kind of framework with which you're approaching it in terms of better tools for educators. How do you see this process aligning with what likely will occur in 2 years anyway, in terms of an actual review of the assessment?
Right. Let me answer that question broadly, and perhaps Bethany can add to that. So we are reviewing the contract and reissuing the contract in 2 years, but that doesn't mean we're going to revise the standards. We're not on a schedule to revise the standards within the next 2 years. So does that answer the question basically?
I guess just trying to understand is in the spirit of also looking at potentially whether a new assessment would occur, not to say that that's what this board would do or the department would do, just trying to understand, do you see this just as totally separate from that process?
Well, I don't see it as for us as an
Yep.
invitation to revise the standards.
Okay.
What we would be looking at is how well our current supplier or vendor compares with any alternatives that might.
Got it. So sort of in parallel.
Yeah.
Is the process. Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? Anyone on, was that Member Kervikis?
It was.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. You kind of alluded to what I was going to ask. I think it was Mr. Guzman. Have other states embarked on a similar endeavor recently that we could learn lessons from?
Go ahead and answer that.
There are some states that have identified essential standards, but it's, I would say, a smaller subset of states that have identified standards, as opposed to it being a broader section of states.
And I would say it's also a mixed bag in terms of their results. There are some that look like they're doing better, but Iowa in particular has identified essential standards, and they seem to have higher proficiency rates, but they've run afoul of the comparisons with the NAEP tests. So they might have to make corrections, or I would expect that's the direction of their essential standards and their proficiency levels or proficiency cut scores.
Thank you.
Vice President Haley.
Just a quick question. How do you see that by identifying the essential standards is going to ensure that we really raise the bar for all of our students in education?
Well, so the feedback, as you heard from the two superintendents who spoke, was that they didn't have enough information after the exam to know how to change or adjust to the students' needs. And so narrowing that and making it more precise and providing more information is what we're trying to do. Even if it's not, even if it's an incremental improvement, I think it's worth, and the superintendent has decided it's worth pursuing.
Is the idea that by receiving information on third graders, a fourth grade educator would be able to see where students were, what they mastered, and where they either need to intervene, maybe accelerate learning, or perhaps provide a remedial education in order to get them on track for the fourth grade assessment?
Yes, more so than current. Yes.
And Dr. Hagerman,
just
please.
to jump in, what we're doing right now in schools is coming up with our own interim assessments that try to get at that. And sometimes they align better or not as well to the state assessment. So having a state assessment that gives you some insight of whether those assessments you're doing internally match what the state's seeing would be helpful. And so we're trying to create that answer internally. And now the state's trying to find a way to give that from the state level, from the state assessment, so you can kind of norm your test or connect your testing to what's going on at the state level.
Thank you, Dr. Well, that's great. Well, you were there also when we had that discussion.
I would also like to interject during the instructional delivery that the teachers give on a daily basis. That's when the formative tests would come in. As Dr. Hagerman said, that is the heart of instruction, the heart of learning, when teachers can run correctives and enrichments for their students depending on which outcome they need. And so I think that is what is going to really catapult our student achievement once teachers can identify it during that instructional delivery and then have correctives and enrichments before after school or during class time.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Dr. Kaur, one more, please.
Yeah, please, Member Kravickas, go ahead.
Thank you. Margaret, I don't know what the latest timeline is, but when do teachers actually, or schools actually receive the results now? And will that change?
Member Kravickas, reports are usually available in June in districts, district level, student level, school level.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Kaur, I have a question.
Please go ahead, Dr. Clay.
My question is, are there any stakeholders who have concerns about this? And if yes, what are they?
So far with the process of, or sorry, President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, Member Dr. Clay. So far as looking at the standards go and what we are developing from a stakeholder group, we're having some really good, robust conversations that have been really positive, looking at, you know, now that we've had the standards for a while and teachers are getting used to both the ELA and the math standards, are there areas where we can guide or maybe focus teachers more? And so I wouldn't say that from my level with standards, we've had concerns. It's more just how can we make this easy for teachers, more understandable, guiding their instructional practice, as well as keeping in line that progression from 3rd through 8th grade to make sure that students are set up for success. When we are offering a public feedback. So at that point in time, we'll have it open for people to comment as well.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, just as a reminder, the board did receive some written feedback on this item, which is attached in the agenda. So in particular from Greater Phoenix Education Management Council, GUPPY-MAC. So that's in there as well.
Thank you. All right, then. Thank you for your participation and presentation, and look forward to the work to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Going to move us on to 5D. This is a presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve recommendations from the State Board K-3 Early Literacy Subcommittee. Director Ross.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Just as a reminder, the board voted to recreate the K-3 Early Literacy Subcommittee. The subcommittee met from April to November, and we had Vice President Haley and Member Meyerson on that committee, Member Meyerson serving as vice chair. They met for several months, generated a list of recommendations that we'll talk about in a moment. But if you remember from the last meeting, Member Kravickas and a couple other members had requested a brief literacy landscape presentation just to get a sense of kind of where we are for data. So we're going to open with that, and then we'll go right into the recommendation. So presenting again will be Linda Burrows from the department. And I believe the Director of English Language Arts from the department, Tiana Sanchez, is with us virtually.
So you're stuck with me again.
Yeah, please.
So I think we have a slide deck. So we prepared based on some of the requests from the board, a brief slide deck on the Mauer data, both from a state and a national point of view. So we want to go to the next slide, please. So my director of ELA and Mauer is Tiana Sanchez, and she's here to answer any questions as well as we kind of go through this presentation for you. Next slide, please. So we have the ELA state data. We have ELA scores, current scores. We have some Mauer trend data to share with you, as well as ELA national data. And then lastly, the literacy activities that my team is undertaking for all of our literacy initiatives. So here is a slide that has the 3rd grade and 4th grade reading scores according to the AASA exam. And obviously the exams before that, starting with 2016. We have in there 3rd and 4th grade students, as well as 3rd and 4th grade economically disadvantaged students, and then 3rd and 4th grade students with disabilities. And so you can see the overall trend. We did take a dip, obviously, during COVID, but we have been slowly recovering from that. Next slide, please. So this is the Maurer trend data to show the states as far as our students with their proficiency rated low, moderate, high, or very high throughout the state. And then now I've got the ELA national data to show you where Arizona falls within the 4th grade and 8th grade NAEP scores. And so again, NAEP is really meant to be a longitudinal test to really see how our state's doing in that way. So you can see in this one in 4th grade, Arizona is actually one of the few states that has been increasing overall from 2011 to 2022. Next slide, please. This just breaks it down into a little bit more detail where you have below NAEP basic, 4th grade is NAEP basic, NAEP proficient, and NAEP advanced, and it shows you Arizona scores versus nationally. Arizona's proficiency levels fall right in that area between NAEP basic and NAEP proficient. And then next slide, please. Then this shows you Arizona compared to national trends as far as that goes. And then these are some student disaggregated information about students between all students, students with disabilities, English language learners, showing you what's happened for all students and then specifically then for their demographics as well. Next slide. And then here are the 8th grade scores. Again, you see Arizona is a little bit to the right of this scale. Again, showing that we are making progress where a lot of states with NAEP, the majority of the states with NAEP have not. Next slide, please. And this too breaks it down into a little bit more detail by the years. Again, showing you where that below NAEP basic and proficiency ratings go, where Arizona is compared to the national average. And then these are the 8th grade scores. So you can see Arizona has been increasing where nationally the blue line has been decreasing. So that's positive news. Recovering from COVID. And then here we break it out into different subgroups. And next slide. So this is a slide on the Foundations of Reading exam. So this shows you the percentage of educators that are passing the exam from Arizona. So while nationally, again, we're making progress, but it's that idea that we still need to keep going. This is not something that's going to change overnight. And so as a ELA team, we are working diligently at continuously trying new things and promoting those things that are working well. So we're seeing our efforts with regards to training teachers in the science of reading and that K-5 literacy endorsement paying off. This shows you that 80% have a passing average of teachers that take this exam. And then I broke it down by the actual institutions. The institutions do include online and in person as well. Next slide.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Core, members of the board. Melissa, can you go back to that slide? Just for some very quick context, as a requirement to earn the K-5 early literacy endorsement, which is required for all K-5 teachers of reading by 2028 and all educator candidates by 25. They have to not only get a certain amount of coursework and training, but they have to earn a passing grade voted on by the board for this exam. Nationally, the pass rate for first-time test takers is 61%. Arizona's is 81%. We're in Arizona, we just received the first big crop of data from ed prep programs. And so just for some context on this.
So here are some of the literacy initiatives that my team is working on. First, and the one that I'm personally really excited about is our coaching initiative. And so ADE is providing funding for 34 coaches. They're in the process of hiring another one around the state to provide coaching to sites based on that science of reading. And what's exciting about this is that These coaches are funded through ADE, and their primary goal is solely to coach. They're not there to be testing coordinators. They're not there to sub for other people. They're strictly there to help teachers teach the science of reading. And what we're seeing in that literacy screener data, because these are still kinder, first and second grade kiddos, we're seeing some tremendous growth and gains that these kids are having that have access, where their teachers have access to that coaching. We also provide the dyslexia training. We have the grant where to become that site designee for dyslexia. All of that goes through our department to, again, make sure that we are providing those resources for students that are struggling readers. And again, all of that training with the dyslexia designee grant is tied to the science of reading. Next is Mauer, and I'm excited with this one as well because we've been providing enhanced guidance to the field on completing Mauer literacy plans. We've increased our webinars, we've increased our office hours to the field, as well as we have the brand new portal that is being beta tested this year to make it easier for LEAs to submit their Mauer plans. And with this, including site visits, we're hopeful and excited to see some changes with that. In addition, for Mauer, the ELA team went back through all of the core curriculums that were on the vetted list to make sure that they meet the current legislation for Mauer guidance, because there were some that had been grandfathered in that really didn't meet the ESSA tiers of evidence or have the research-based practices that we needed to see that were required by the legislation. And so we have gone through and done that with all the vetted core curriculums. This spring, my team has the plan to go through all the supplemental curriculums and everything additional to also look at it and make sure that it is tied to the science of reading and meets the highest letter of the legislation. And then lastly, my team is providing training to teachers to learn more about the science of reading. So this includes all of our free trainings. We do the past 2 years, the ELA team has gone on a roadshow all over the state, which has been super fun in the summers to go to different areas, getting outside of Maricopa County to train teachers on the science of reading and answer questions and be of assistance to them. We also offer free asynchronous courses to meet those requirements for the K-5 literacy endorsement. We have had over 1,400 educators sign up for that, as well as we are in the process of having those people work through it. And as soon as they work through it, then we'll open up some more pathways courses, so that way teachers can get those trainings done and then take that Foundations of Reading exam. We also are excited that we're using some of our leftover ESSER funds to provide facilitator trainings, where what we are doing is we're creating trainers of trainers for letters, where these trainers get certified by Lexia to provide that letters training. Then they can go back to the districts to then provide that training, and it's a much minimal cost because they're just paying for the materials, as opposed to paying for Lexia to ship out trainers to come to them. And so we're super excited about that. And then the last thing that we're doing is creating communities of practice. And this is the idea of Mauer office hours, but also creating those areas where educators can come together to really learn about what are the latest research going on, how can they improve their craft and teaching, what do they need to do to make accommodations for students with special needs, and really just providing a space and a forum for educators all across the state to improve their literacy skills. Next slide, please. And I believe that's it.
Thank you. Questions or comments from my colleagues? Member Clark.
I just have a few super quick questions because I know we're running behind. One of the things I just wanted to flag as a mom who has 3 kids with dyslexia diagnosed that a lot of people aren't aware of, so this is my opportunity to share it publicly and then ask for follow-up from you, is that public schools do not diagnose dyslexia. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you explain why so people are aware?
Tiana, you want to take that one?
Or yeah, Tiana.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Member Clark. Obviously, teachers are not doctors, and doctors are the ones who would then diagnose a student with dyslexia. So what we can do is at the actual schools, we have teams, and usually those are like student centered teams who look at the data, who then use whatever assessments, the dyslexia assessments that are provided using rapid automated numbering to help to then guide the parent to possibly look for diagnosis if that might be a possibility that the child might be having a dyslexia impairment. So
thank you so much. And the reason
Sure.
that I bring this up is, yes, neuropsychologists are the ones that do the evaluation that diagnose dyslexia. And the reason I bring this up is because those evaluations are very expensive. And so what I have seen just for myself and then also anecdotally is that pretty much if you are wealthy, you have the money. It's around $2,500, sometimes cheaper, to get a dyslexia diagnosis. If you are not wealthy, you do not get a dyslexia diagnosis in this state, unless you come to us and we try to help you navigate all the different options and things. The reason why I think this is really important, and I know different folks in the reading and special education space might think differently, I'm just coming at it from a parent perspective, is that even if your child is screened with dyslexia, even if you're blessed to be on a campus where they've received some of this incredible training, like letters, lips, Aldor and Gillingham, it's all phenomenal. There is still a huge disconnect, and I believe we see it in our state reading scores. There's a huge disconnect in saying, I've screened this child for dyslexia. I want to provide some services and interventions, and this child has been diagnosed with dyslexia, and I'm going to provide a very intensive dyslexia-specific remediation program. Parents are unable to get that. Anecdotally, from what I hear, they're unable to push forward and get that real deep intervention services, sometimes from an IEP, because they don't have a diagnosis. And so I'm sharing that. I know it doesn't completely directly relate to everything, but when I see those reading scores, yes, there is improvement, but I still think 24% is not so great. I do wonder, gee, are the 1 in 5 kids who have dyslexia undiagnosed, and is there anything we can do about it in our state? Is there any ESSER money we can throw to it? Is there any pilot program we can throw? Is there a way that we can make that diagnosis cheaper so that we can help families get potentially better or more specific services? So just wanted to flag that for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Clark. Any other questions or comments?
Dr. Kaur?
Oh, Member Kervikis, please.
I have a couple questions. One is, do we in rule or statute define, there's a variety of terms that I hear used, like high quality instructional materials, scientifically based research instruction. I'm probably having them wrong. Do we define them anywhere? And also, do we define the reverse of what's not included? As we know, many states, not many, but quite a few have pushed for saying things specifically like 3 queuing systems are not included. So that's my question. Do we define it anywhere? And if so, do we define what's not included in that?
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, Member Kervikis. So the definition of reading is in statute, and the definition of reading as written in statute corresponds to what is commonly referred to as the science of reading, focusing on phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Thank you, Linda. And actually, in addition to spelling and handwriting. So there is the definition is in statute, has been for a number of years. And then the move on when reading legislation does have specific verbiage defining the materials that can be used for the core reading and intervention programs, corresponding to level of ESSA evidence level requirements and corresponding to elements connected to that definition of reading. So there is what I believe what you're asking is, yes, that is in statute. The other part of what you're asking, many states nationally have seen legislation regarding things like the 3 queuing system and banning it that has not arrived at Arizona as of yet.
We do, if I can also interject, have a rubric online that we've posted so that way any parent could go on there to see curriculum. Companies can go on there to see exactly what we do look for with curriculums when we vet them for them according to the Mauer legislation.
And just one comment on that. But to Member Krivic's point, the curriculum that you have listed though in the green does not allow 3Qing. So anything that you would have. So even though we don't have legislation on it, right, we still are trying to prevent that in that capacity. Is that right? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My second question is special education curriculums considered a supplemental curriculum? I think that was the term that you used.
Thank you for that question.
Tiana question, yeah.
Right. I can answer that. Thank you, Member Krivickas. Yeah, so when it comes to special education curriculum, that would be a separate curriculum that we do not, as a Move On When Reading team, review the research for. So we are only reviewing research behind core reading programs for general education. We review intervention programs and also supplemental materials as well. We do not review special education programs or curriculum.
Well, I think that may be, I don't know if it's a loophole is the right word, because it's been brought to my attention. I know I spoke to Linda about this. There are two major curriculums that are in a lot of self-contained classrooms that are very whole language based. And so, but to me, that is a core curriculum because these are typically classrooms where they are receiving all their instruction in that classroom. So I would consider that core, but I'd be interested in talking further about making sure that, again, I hate to use the word loophole, but because those are considered separate, but to me, it's a core curriculum. And also when you think about the fact, and kind of to Jenny's point, especially a lot of the dyslexia or SLD type instruction is going to happen in a resource room often. So making sure that we're really addressing all these other locations and making sure those curriculums are aligned, because again, I've had it brought to my attention by two really big advocates that there are curriculums out there in a lot of classrooms that are not aligned. So I don't know how we can approach that. I don't think we need statutory authority to do that. I'll leave it to Sean or Tiana or Linda to tell me if we think we do.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, Member Krivickas, I will follow up with the department. The definitions in statute, I believe, allow for what it is you're requesting, but I'll follow up with the department after the meeting.
Thank you,
Director Russ. Appreciate it. Yep, please go ahead.
One last question. I believe it's my understanding that originally the language included special education teachers in the literacy endorsement. And for some reason, it wasn't in the final bill. Is that true?
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, there were numerous iterations of that bill. As you know, any bill goes through numerous iterations before it gets across the finish line. At one point, there was that verbiage. I don't know why it was removed, or if there were sort of certain groups advocating for that. I can ask. The senators who pushed that bill, I don't believe are in this Senate anymore, but I can follow up with some Senate staff and see if they have any more information.
Thank
but
you.
that language was in fact removed, right?
Correct. It was.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Go ahead, Member Krivickas, please.
I'll say thank you. And I'd like to explore that because clearly, as the data shows us, they are the group that's probably struggling the most nationally as well as in Arizona. But to me, it's not just addressing special education as a subgroup or special population. It's also kind of this parallel process of when and how students are actually identified for a reading disability versus just needing reading intervention. So that's why, and I'm eager to hear more about the literacy recommendations and the work of the committee. So there's kind of a parallel process. I think sometimes schools don't know when those steps have to be taken and how they work with multi-tiered systems of support and all these other great things. So I'd like to continue that conversation in future committees or task force about giving better clarity to schools on how those interact. But I'd also like to talk about the teachers and the curriculum exemptions almost.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So we are still in item 5D.
Correct.
And we will now transition to the board's review and potential vote to approve the recommendations from the K through Early Literacy Subcommittee. Here to briefly tee those up is the chair of the subcommittee, Terry Clark from Read On, Arizona.
Excellent. Welcome, Terry.
Good afternoon.
Now,
everyone.
yeah, you're
I
right.
can say good afternoon. Thank you, President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, and members of the board. The K-3 Literacy Subcommittee members represent expertise in education, policy, literacy, instructional practice, and implementation experience across the state. As the chair of the subcommittee, working in concert with Vice Chair and State Board Member Meyerson and State Board Member Haley, as well as Executive Director Ross, we are so thankful for their service of the subcommittee members over 6 months of meetings and convenings. The subcommittee took their charge very seriously to provide recommendations on how to improve early literacy for all students to heart, and we identified beginning in April a number of key issues to explore related to challenges and barriers to student achievement in K-3 literacy. Over those months, we had the opportunity to learn from national experts that shared how other states have been making progress, as well as bright spots in our own backyard in Arizona here that showed that with vision, with leadership, with commitment, and with consistent focus and implementation, significant improvements are possible. So these recommendations recognize that Arizona also has a goal of 72% of third graders reading proficiently by the end of third grade by 2030. The subcommittee prioritized, as you see right there in front of you, 3 high leverage recommendations that we feel will move Arizona towards that stated goal of 72%. These drivers are meant to build on things that are already in place that just have not been done to scale yet. We, as a partner in much of the early literacy work in Arizona, have worked hard and collaboratively to bring additional money to be able to do these small pilot programs and these beginnings. The early literacy coaching grant, the K-5 literacy endorsement, as well as others. A significant amount of funding externally and state funding has been identified in addition to what is provided in Move On When Reading. And the full list of recommendations is all sort of trickles up to support those key drivers and to get us to that significant improvement of 72%. So with this, I just want to ask you, to point out that the science and research says that 95% or more of kids can learn to read and be taught to read. And I want to maybe steal a line from our original, one of our very first speakers, our student of the month in 4th grade. We just have to remember that we can do hard things. Yeah. That resonated for me. And we can, when we make smart decisions, when we're focused, when we implement to scale, when we don't sacrifice on evidence-based and what we know works, we can get more kids. And I think we can actually get beyond that progress meter goal. With that, the committee, on behalf of the subcommittee, we're respectfully asking the board to approve these recommendations and help put Arizona on the pathway to early literacy success. With that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you, Terry. Are there, in fact, any questions from my colleagues? Of course, we've received these recommendations a week or so ago and been staffed on them, and I know you fielded some questions in the interim. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Yeah, Dr. Hagerman, please.
Just one comment. I really appreciate the whole committee's work. Just like the special ed committee, I look forward to moving forward. I just need to remind all of us that as hard it was to get to this point, the next part involves a lot of work. And so we have a lot of stuff in front of us that I look forward to doing it because we can do hard things, just like our student told us.
Indeed. Anyone else? Then I will in fact call the vote with my thanks to Terry and Member Meyerson and Member Haley for serving on the committee and the entire committee. But with that, do I have a motion that the board adopt the recommendations from the State Board K-3 Early Literacy Subcommittee? Do I have such a motion? Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second?
Second.
And Vice President Haley. Any further conversation or discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Actually, and Dr. Can I add one just thing?
Of course you can, yeah.
So again, given that we have just passed this, thank you all for that. I think one thing that's really important to us, especially coming out of the committee, is, as you saw in that document, we identified three sort of our most kind of what we believe to be most high leverage. And I think to Dr. Hagerman's point of like, there is so much more work to do here. I would like to ask Executive Director Ross to, in order to continue the work, to create an additional working group supported by the board staff to ensure that we can, as much as possible, advance the initiatives that we identified, specifically, obviously, these top three that we designed to be most high leverage. But again, just huge thanks to the board and wanted to see Director Ross if we could do that.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, Member Meyerson, members of the board. Absolutely, board staff will begin the process of developing a working group, and we'll bring a plan before the board in January for a formal vote.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And thank you. I'm going to move us on to 5E. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action to open rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2615 endorsement updates. Director Ross?
Actually, this is going to be Deputy Director.
I'm sorry, stole your thunder. Go ahead. Yes. Please go ahead.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. It's my pleasure to talk to you about this item, which is a rule package recommended to you from your Certification Advisory Committee at the urging of the Department Certification Unit. They've been working since June of 2024, had about 4 meetings, and considered endorsement rules that may be as many as 25 years old and haven't been updated in decades. And so this rule package impacts 12 different endorsements and contains 2 general endorsement rule revisions. In 2016, 2017, we added a lot of certificates and a lot of pathways, and these endorsements haven't been updated since then. The rule package clarifies language as to the purpose of these endorsements. Some have updated language in their title, modernizing it, such as foreign language to world language, which is more inclusive of Native American language and American Sign Language. The reading specialist endorsements have been updated to include the science of reading coursework and other technical cleanups for clarity, grammar, outlining, and just kind of implementation that the certification unit has noticed over the years. So with that, I stand ready to answer questions, as well as my colleague from the department, Deputy Associate Superintendent Wilbur.
Fantastic. Are there, in fact, any questions or comments from my colleagues? Okay. And again, the vote today is to open the rulemaking. And Bruce, you have brought such clarity and brevity to the issue that there are no questions, which is amazing, which is great. So then do I have a motion? Do I in fact have a motion to open rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2615 endorsements? Do I have such a motion? Dr. Hagerman, do I have a second? Member Meyerson, any questions or conversation? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Okay, passes unanimously. I will move us on to 5F. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action to adopt the board's aligned 2025 strategic plan, legislative priorities, and research agenda. Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. As you know, the board develops and adopts a strategic plan each year in December. The board staff starts that process in July, where we solicit feedback from board members. We did this formally in the retreat as well, and provide iterations to the board, gathering feedback, culminating in the document that is attached to this agenda item. So in addition to that strategic plan, our Director of Policy, Rico Yanez, transitions that into a legislative priority, and then our Data and Research Analyst, Jessica Mueller, transitions that into a research agenda to make sure that those 3 things are fully aligned. We are here to answer any questions if you have them.
Are there any questions? I know, again, this has gone through multiple conversations, multiple iterations. Is there any discussion at this point? Okay. Hearing none, do I have a motion that the board adopt the aligned 2025 strategic plan, legislative priorities, and research agenda? Do I have such a motion? Member Meyerson, do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Haley, any discussion or conversation? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Fantastic. Passes unanimously. How are we doing, team? Do we need a break, or we okay to, okay, we're okay to plow through? Then I will move us on to item 6. This is the call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on today's consent portion of enforcement actions. Consistent with the earlier calls to the public, speakers will be limited to 2 minutes. Director Ross, I understand we have some folks who would like to chat with us, correct?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, are not for this call to the public, but for the next item. There are no speakers for this call to the public.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. With that, I'll move us on to the aforementioned consent agenda for certification enforcement actions. We have a number of them, 7A 1 through 14. Would anyone like any of these cases removed from the consent agenda, or can we handle them as presented? Okay. Then without any to be pulled, do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A14, 7B1, and 7C1? Just to be clear, we're also approving 7B1 and 7C1. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Vice President Haley, I was so convoluted in setting that up that I confused folks, but you were with me. Good. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Hagerman. Any conversation or discussion? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of presenting approving this as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Excellent. I will now move us on to item 8. This is the call to the public for the public to comment on items on today's general session portion of enforcement actions. Consistent with earlier call to the public, I'll limit folks to 2 minutes, please. And I do understand there are some folks who would like to chat with us. Is that correct?
That is correct. Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up first, we'll have Raul Cardenas, followed by Eric Cardenas, and then Marcy Barenberg.
Go ahead and, yeah.
There you go.
Fantastic. Perfect.
Members of the board, thank you for letting me speak again. My name is Raul Cardina, Eric's father. This is getting tiresome and it seems like it won't be resolved. As I said before, when I watched the PPAC meeting from home, it seemed as if they had already had the answers they wanted and were mostly annoyed that the boys did not face the teacher that traumatized them. When my wife spoke, they asked her about it and why not have them do it on Zoom. When the state's lawyer informed us Ms. Gemmer could ask the boys questions, my wife and I talked to Eric. He said he did not know if he could remain calm talking to her even from another room. He would have answered PPAC's questions if it could have been done without having to interact with Ms. Gemmer. PPAC and the lawyer who spoke at the last board meeting seemed to mention the social media aspect, like maybe they didn't agree with it being utilized. The school was told that it would be used if they continued to ignore the situation. The mom of student A was told that the ASDB superintendent said that she was waiting for the situation to blow over. It was at that point that student C's mom made the first video, bringing awareness to the situation. Social media was the last resort, and like it or not, social media is a powerful tool for advocacy. PPAC was also very focused on the school's mishandling of the situation and set aside Ms. Gemmer's unprofessional behavior that was reported by student A's dad and my wife to the Department of Education. The Office of Civil Rights was utilized and acted in response to the school's allowing hostile learning environment to develop and continue. OCR did not agree. OCR did not agree with Ms. Gammer that the school thoroughly investigated the situation. This is public record, as you know. We ask you to address the unprofessional behavior of Ms. Gemmer. It was also mentioned last meeting about the man who verbally attacked my wife and Amy after the last PPAC meeting. Amy mentioned how he told them that they were bad parents and that they should be ashamed of themselves. I, for one, I'm very proud of them for standing up and persisting in their efforts. They have given so much time and energy to advocate not only for our children, but other kids Carrie has abused in the past and hopefully prevent her from being able to do it in the future. Our
Thank
kids
you, Mr.
deserve better.
Carter. Thank you. Thank you.
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Core, members of the board. Up next is Eric Cardenas, followed by Marcy Barenberg, and then Jerry Watson.
If he's not voicing, I can't see him to voice for him right now. Just FYI.
Mute it.
Mute.
We got him start over.
We're going to ask for him to start over. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
The interpreter, he did not see.
Is he voicing or is he not? I couldn't tell.
He's going to voice for a very small section.
He's going to voice for a small. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I was like, I couldn't see him at all. So. Hello, my name is Eric. Again, this is my response to Ms. Gammer's and this presentation. So we as deaf kids, after the last meeting, we're familiar that there are some things that, you know, she just doesn't understand about deaf people and calling us animals because of the way we use our voice and how it sounds different than others. And some of us voice really well, some of us don't. And you can't blame that on us. Some of us use cochlear implants or hearing devices.
I believe before that you are having me deaf people not a baby animal, which is you a boy.
And to give you an example, that is my voice, as you can hear. So the last time they said that Ms. Gammer said that she was just teasing that about our voice and that was just a joke, but that's a mean joke to say, and saying that she was going to call 911 because it sounded like there was animals. She shouldn't say something like that. Please don't let this type of abuse continue to other kids. She is not following our safety plan. And we are always, anytime we are in school, and we are good people, we just have, and our school feels like, and it feels like we should have a safe place when we're in school.
Thank you for letting me speak. Please Carrie said to be voices.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, member of the board. Up next, we have Marcy Barenberg, followed by Jerry Watson, and then Laura Morales.
Thank you, Eric. Please.
I am wondering if I can read what he actually prepared to say because it didn't all come across. I think he was signing a little fast and nervously. Okay. He said, hello, my name is Eric. Hello, my name is Eric Cardenas. Again, I want to report about Carrie Gummer and her abuse toward us deaf kids. After the last meeting, I know some of you do not know a lot about deaf people. Someone said that maybe it is offensive to deaf people to call them an animal. Yes, it is. Some of us don't like to use our voice because we know how we sound different. Some can't speak good and some not at all. I do a lot of speech therapy and I have cochlear implants, but not all deaf people do this. I prefer sign language, but I want to demonstrate my voice. And that's when he said, hi, members of the board, thank you for having me. Deaf people shouldn't be compared to animals when we use our voices. Carrie was a teacher for a long time at that school and she knows about this issue. Last time someone else said that Carrie was joking. She did not look or sound like she was joking, but she was fully mean to Caden and threatened to call 911. Told him he sounded like a zoo animal, which is not okay to treat someone like that. Please don't let this woman continue to abuse deaf kids. She did not follow our safety plans, and my mom had to go to court to get a judge to make her leave us alone. Why is this okay? Teachers should be the good people
and I should not have to leave my school to feel safe. Again, thank you for letting me speak. Please help us, and Carrie deserves to be punished.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little emotional. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. My name is Marcy Berenberg. I'm student B's mother, Eric. I filed my complaint with the Board of Education in early 2023 after the school mishandled the classroom event and Ms. Gemmer's behaviors had escalated. Since February, I've been to both PPAC meetings and I have spoken with this board at all 5 meetings that addressed this. We have been more than 2 years from the initial event that started this, and Ms. Gemmer said at the PPAC that she's not remorseful for her actions. After the last meeting, there were many comments and questions from you guys, and it was hard to sit there with answers and not be allowed to address those. I rewatched the meeting last week and attempted to answer as much as I could in the written comment that was attached to the agenda, and I hope you were able to read it, but I am going to highlight a few of them. Carrie taught in a deaf school for several decades. She knew exactly how offensive her choice of words were towards the child she addressed. She didn't say it sounded like a zoo because of the rowdiness in the classroom. It was an attack on student A's vocalizations. And she told PPAC she knew which kid was making the vocalizations. Furthermore, the board asked if our statements matched what was said at PPAC. The state's lawyer told us not to bring any notes and we were only to answer the questions that were asked. So no, it wasn't addressed in the same way. Information I provided that lawyer that showed she lied under oath in the first PPAC meeting was not discussed in the second meeting, such as when she said that it was the first time she was formally accused of being unprofessional with a student. Carrie also said that she requested that from us, the proof, and she never did, not even through her lawyer when she threatened to sue us. You have heard and read many comments from parents and staff over previous meetings. They've emailed and spoken with the administration at the school. Just it never made it into Ms. Gemmer's permanent file. One thing that has been very glazed over and was mentioned at the PPAC was that all 3 boys had orders of protection that were issued by 3 different judges from 3 different cities, saying that Ms. Gemmer was not to harass them. They said that her behaviors were so egregious that it was prudent to make it that it was now illegal for her to continue them. When the deputy called me and told me that he served her on Eric's, he said that he told her that she could request to have them overturned and explained to her that we parents had the burden of proof that the injunctions were necessary. She did not request the courts to drop any of these, and I believe she knew we had that necessary proof. And her written statement was full of fallacies. However, the one thing that Ms. Gemmer is correct about is this has been going on for too long. I beg of you, at the very least, if she's going to keep her license, to require her to do sensitivity and deaf culture training. These are vulnerable kids. Some of them can't communicate fluently with their parents.
Thank you.
Please protect them.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, virtually, we have Jerry Watson, followed by Taylor Sasemski.
There we go. Go ahead, Ms. Wilson. Whenever you're ready, we are.
Just for the interpreter, I needed to unmute. Okay, go ahead, Jerry. So hello, I am a teacher at PDSC, and I used to work with, I'm sorry for the interpreter, you worked with who? The name. Oh, I worked with Carrie, I'm sorry for the interpreter, Gemmer. And I was a 3rd grade teacher in K through 9.
During 2018, 2019.
And so I was working at PDSD, and then I had a few concerns about Carrie as a teacher and how her approach with other students and staff. And sometimes she needed to repeat herself. She was not clear. And if the other interpreter, could you?
And sometimes she would not repeat herself because she didn't consider herself not clear. And at that time, one of the administration that we spoke with said if there's any concerns about, the approach that she's had with others. And I said, well, what's happened? What happened? And that's what happened after that meeting. Carrie then came up and spoke to me directly and said that what I spoke with Courtney, anything I spoke with Courtney Fritz, and asked what I said. And I said, well, the reason I wasn't feeling comfortable or safe to share or discuss any of my concerns about her was because she had already became really good friends with top administration, and I just didn't feel like it was a safe or comfortable environment for me. And others had complained the same I had, and nothing had occurred at that time. So that's when I decided to leave. And yes, that is the reason I left my job, as well as other reasons. And I just feel like, I'm a bit shocked because this case is still ongoing, and I'm not understanding because we should have already had this discussion long ago, and I still feel like it's just shocking that this should have been resolved long ago, and it's shocking to see that it still continues.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Taylor Sasemski.
Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Sasemski, attorney on behalf of Patricia Moore, agenda item 9B4. I am here today to ask that the board approve Ms. Moore's
Ms. Sasemski, you cut out. You said, I'm here to ask the board approve, and then we didn't hear anything after
Gotcha.
that.
So sorry about that. I'm here today to ask the board to approve Ms. Moore's negotiated settlement agreement. I don't have any additional comments at this time, but am available to answer any questions that the board may have on that matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Thank you very much. Then I will move us on to item 9. We have 9A1, 9B1 through 6, and 9C1. Would anyone like to have any of these items removed for further discussion, or would you like to handle them as a group? Vice President Haley.
I'd like to remove 9A1.
Absolutely. Any others beyond 9A1? Okay, then I will ask for a motion that would approve 9B1 through 6, as well as 9C1. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Clark, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm going to give that one to Dr. Clay by a nose. Any additional conversation about that? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay, passes unanimously. I'll bring us back to 9A1 and Vice President Haley.
Thank you. I just, given both the materials that we have received and the testimony that we have received today, and reading through the PPAC report, I'm concerned that we have not thoroughly looked at this particular educator and have not provided, I guess what I would like to say is I believe that the educator should be censured and should go through proper training, and the behavior she demonstrated to students, whether in jest or not, is inappropriate. And so those are my quick comments, and happy to entertain questions or have others to offer comment.
Vice President Haley, just to clarify, you're seeking a letter of censure as a motion.
Yes.
Or okay, thank you. Any other thoughts or conversations from members?
Dr. Core?
Yeah, Dr. Clay, please go ahead.
I agree. There should be, I agree with the censure. There should be something done to even stop this behavior from happening in the future. So I agree.
Okay, then,
Dr. Core?
uh, Member Kavickas?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just want to thank the parents for coming repeatedly. I know it's hard during the day, and I'm really sorry that it had to get to this point and wasn't taken care of locally. And I want to acknowledge that for this population of kids, even with all the school choice we have, they don't have as many choices and options. So I just want to thank them for coming and advocating for their kids.
Thank you, Member Kavickas. Let me, I've been provided with some very specific language for this motion. So do I have a motion to affirm the findings of fact, conclusions of law, all of which were reviewed by the board, and reject PPAC's recommendation of no disciplinary action and move to issue a letter of censure based on the finding of unprofessional conduct occurred on the part of educator Carrie Gamar as stated in the conclusions of law 25, 26, and 27. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Meyerson and Dr. Clay. Executive Director Ross, please go ahead.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. At the moment, the motion, as stated, is for a letter of censure.
Correct.
Vice President Haley did mention the idea of seeing coursework. If that is of interest to the board, we can amend the motion. We can help you amend the motion. So if that is of interest.
I would happily entertain an amendment to that motion. Vice President Haley, do you wish to do so?
I would like to amend the motion to include direct the educator to participate in, it's the NASDAQ, I believe, coursework on good behavioral practices in the classroom, if others are open to that.
Do I need a second to that, or is that without objection?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay. So we have a revised motion and a second that speaks to rejecting PPAC's recommendation of no disciplinary action, including a letter of censure, as well as specific training as referenced by Vice President Haley. Any other discussion or conversation? Okay, hearing none, I'll call them all those in favor of the motion as presented.
Dr. Core.
I was so close. Go ahead.
We need to formally amend the motion.
Okay.
So it is. Make a motion to amend.
I make the motion to amend.
And I will provide you the language. Forgive my handwriting. Dr. Core, we take a 2-minute break for me to write this out for you.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate the patience of my colleagues. We want to get this right this time, right? Yep. So if we could just don't scatter on me, sit tight, and I'll get some specific language. Good. This is good. I appreciate everyone's patience. So I am going to seek a motion. Do I have a motion to affirm the findings of fact and conclusions of law, all of which were reviewed by the board, and reject PPAC's recommendation of no disciplinary action, and move to issue a letter of censure based on the finding of unprofessional conduct occurred on part of educator Carrie Gamar, as stated in conclusions of law 25, 26, and 27. In addition to a letter of censure, the respondent shall complete the NASDAQ prevention and correction course. Respondent shall complete the course and provide proof of completion within 90 days to the board's enforcement action unit. If the respondent does not complete the coursework within the time frame required, any and all certificates held by the respondent shall be summarily suspended without further notice until proof of successful completion is provided. The coursework shall be completed at the respondent's own expense. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Vice President Haley, do I have a second? Member Kravickas. Any further conversation or discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented, please indicate by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, I will bring us on to item 10, which is a summary of current events, future meeting dates. And as we do that, I would just like to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season, and I hope it's just wonderful and restful. Executive Director Ross, any final words?
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, thank you for an interesting and productive meeting. I echo Dr. Kaur, happy holidays to everybody. I would promise a gift of not reaching out to you, but I don't think I can keep that promise. The next board
and
meeting,
vice versa.
The next board meeting will be Monday, January 27th at 9 a.m. Have a great day, everybody.
Fantastic. We are adjourned at 12:48.